Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, September 23rd, 2021. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Alexandra Brodsky, author of Sexual Justice, Supporting Victims, Ensuring Due Process, and Resisting the Conservative Backlash. Meanwhile, painful infrastructure negotiations continue as Biden met with congressional Democrats yesterday, and the White House thinks they've finally gotten the Mansion Cinema Wing to hang their hat on a dollar figure that they'll offer to the rest of the caucus, so hopefully the negotiating against ourselves portion of the process is done. Meanwhile, the threat of a government shutdown gets more real as Republicans seem to hold firm on filibustering the funding bill. The Office of Management and Budget has braced for impact, sending out guidance on a potential shutdown. However, putting the funding and debt ceiling package through reconciliation does remain an option. As the FDA authorizes Pfizer booster shots for those at high risk and 65 and older, the White House announced it will buy 500 million Pfizer shots for global donation. Still insufficient for those inequities, and much less effective than, say, waiving patents, which Biden in public says he supports in private.
We gotta look into them more.
An attempt at a bipartisan police reform bill is officially dead in the Senate, meaning the federal government has taken zero legislative action in the wake of George Floyd's murder. Great for Democratic fundraising, though.
They kneeled.
They did kneel, and they wore kente cloth. New York City is set to pass a measure securing minimum pay bathroom access and tip security for its delivery drivers, a good step forward as Prop 22 is tied up in California courts. And lastly, the U.S. Special Envoy to Haiti has quit in disgust over the treatment of Haitian asylum seekers in a scathing resignation letter. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, Sam is out, and obviously, it's an Emma and Matt and Bradley Thursday. Welcome to the program. Welcome to the real fun day of the week. We know tomorrow's Casual Friday, but this is when
Boss is gone.
Yeah, and so time to start the show a few minutes late, but you know, Sam does that too, so I think we're okay.
More than you do, frankly.
More than I do. Would you say that I'm a more timely host?
Yes.
Ha! Well, there you go. And I will continue to move the show along smoothly by transitioning in a beautiful way to the Bernie Sanders clip that we have teed up for you. So, Bernie Sanders is the Senate Budget Committee chair, and I'm not sure if you're aware of that. It was a pretty big deal. And so he's been at the center of these infrastructure negotiations. Now, understand that he initially floated a $6 trillion infrastructure figure. All of this is spread out over 10 years. So
that's a key point. This is not like $6 trillion, which we could use in a single year with how much we've neglected our basic infrastructure.
Right.
But this is stretched out over 10 years.
But notice how there are other bills that the media will frame as their spending in a current year. They choose to, for this bill, refer to it as $3.5 trillion, et cetera. So anyway, he ended up landing on the 3.5 trillion figure over 10 years. So there was already a compromise. There were already cuts. And yet, this is the way that Gayle King and the rest of the CBS morning show crew approached their interview with Sanders, despite the fact that this was already, a little under half of his initial ask as budget chair. Will you agree to cut? Will you agree to cut? It doesn't matter substantively what the cut is, what is getting cut, but we need cuts. This is the talking point that our producers gave to us, and this is where we stand on the political spectrum, and this is the line of questioning you can expect from the mainstream press. Any cut, any blood, any scalp from the bill, that's what we need. But Bernie reframed the question really well.
Consider a number less than $3.5 trillion?
No, right. Look, we're talking about numbers. You tell me what we should cut. Tell the working families of this country that we don't need to make child care affordable. Tell the American people and the younger people that we should not address the crisis of climate change and try to save the planet. Tell the homeless people that we should not build affordable housing. Tell the young people that we should not make community colleges tuition-free. All we are trying to do is address the crises facing working families and demand that the wealthiest people in this country start paying their fair share of taxes. They are fighting back big time. But at the end of the day, I believe we're going to prevail.
And we hope that they're going to prevail. Now, it seems that Pelosi is confident. I read a retelling of one of these. It might have been Punchbowl or something like that. One Democratic staffer says, she's got that look in her eye. Like, oh, God, it's time for the real negotiating to happen. So they are actually trying to get this reconciliation framework done in time for this promised vote on Monday, which still seems incredibly unrealistic. Biden has resisted calls from progressives to push back that September 27th date because there's potentially not enough time for there to be the negotiation process that is necessary to get things done for that two-bill track to happen. But as of now, that doesn't seem to be in Biden's plans. However, the thing that is in our favor is that this is all of Biden's agenda, essentially, wrapped into this reconciliation package. He needs this to pass as much as the progressives who want this for principled reasons need it to pass. And so, for the first time in quite a while, the progressives are in lockstep with the administration, with the Democratic president, and that is good news for us. The bad news is that moderates have a bit of an advantage. Sorry?
Home field advantage.
Home field advantage, right. But it's more than that. It's like they're wearing pads and progressives have to tackle without any pads on. It's a significant advantage because they have corporate and moneyed interests on their side. And so they have the ability to stand firm and stand pat. And they also aren't principled in the way that they want to deliver for the American people. Progressives, Biden, Democratic leadership feel an urgency because they want to say they got something done before the midterms. And of course, progressives want these substantive changes for people. The centrist corporate types, colloquially called moderates, even though they are not, I might have just accidentally called them moderates then. They're able to play a game in a bit of a sociopathic way that those other actors aren't. So things are ramping up. Time will tell, but I appreciate Bernie Sanders' effort to reframe the conversation around cuts. This is not cuts for the sake of cuts. These are cuts that would affect housing, climate proposals, all of these important elements of the infrastructure package that are talked about without any understanding or any context about what those cuts contain. He brought it back to that, which is something he's been quite effective as a public figure and politician. Yeah, we go the Bernie way, or the Democratic Party is corrupted by money to even do what Joe Biden wants it to do. One side says this, one side says that. Matt, I'm not sure about that. All right, we have to take a quick break. Sam will be speaking to you with some advertisements, and when we come back, we will be joined by Alexandra Brodsky, author of Sexual Justice Supporting Victims, Ensuring Due Process, and Resisting the Conservative Backlash. Be right back. Here you go, Sam.
Thank you, Emma. Yes, folks. One of today's sponsors is a fan of the program. He is the proprietor of mysolarnerd.com. What is mysolarnerd.com? It is a consulting service from a longtime fan and listener who has years of experience working in the solar industry. And here's the thing. If you're a homeowner, you may have considered solar, but you didn't know where to start. And maybe, as we had an IMer actually earlier in the week talk to us, there are programs out there that end up trapping people in long-term leases that are problematic. Well, this is why Danny actually started mysolarnerd.com. He saw a lot of stuff that he thought was predatory. He didn't want to be involved in that. He is a supporter of solar technology and also doing it right, giving homeowners the best deal possible. A lot of homeowners aren't aware that there's solar options that are currently available. You don't know how to navigate this whole thing. That's where My Solar Nerd comes in. It is now possible to retrofit a home with solar panels for no money down. Most homeowners that switch over to solar see a significant savings starting in their first year, and this is possible thanks to the Solar Investor Tax Credit. It is not going to be here forever. My Solar Nerd's mission is simple: help you find the best solar program for your home and make the transition as easy and smooth as possible. How do they do it? They do it by A, analyzing your usage, B, finding the best equipment for your needs, C, determining the incentives and financing you may qualify for, and then finally, project manage the process between you and the installers, obtaining permits, et cetera, et cetera. Look, don't wait. Some of those tax credits and incentives are sunsetting. The current 26% tax credit drops down to 22% next year before going away. If a project is completed by 12/31 of this year, that homeowner qualifies for the 26% tax credit, so there's still time for you. Some markets are prone to power outages, may actually qualify for off-the-grid backup solutions. Majority Report listeners will get a $200 gift card upon installation of their solar system. Go to mysolarnerd.com, fill out the inquiry form now, and make sure that you select the Majority Report listener for how you heard about mysolarnerd.com. And that's the only way you're going to receive that $200 gift card upon installation. Let them know that we sent you. Check it out, mysolarnerd.com. And thank you to Aura for sponsoring today's program. Aura is giving our audience 40% off when you go to aura.com/majority. I want you to take a second. Think about all your online accounts. Think about your finances. Think about the different devices you have. Are you doing anything to protect them? Because if you're like most people, the answer, Emma, is no. And you're probably reusing your old passwords all over the place. A data breach to any one of those services could create a lot of problems for you. Someone sees that you're using this password on this site, then they go and they try a bunch of other sites with your email, and bingo, bango. Every 10 seconds, someone becomes a victim of fraud or identity theft. A lot of these people never recover their stolen money, and even the ones who do, it's a huge hassle. Let's talk about how Aura can protect you. Aura is a new type of security service that protects your online data and devices with one simple subscription. You get alerted to fraud, you get alerted to threats, and fast. Like if your online accounts or passwords were leaked online, or if someone tries to open a bank account in your name, you'll know it. With an easy online dashboard and alerts sent straight to your phone, Aura keeps you in control and guides you through solving any issues. All plans come with $1 million in identity theft insurance to help recover your stolen funds, and experienced U.S.-based customer support that has got your back. So if you want amazing protection from hackers and scammers and phishers and all those things, check out Aura. You get 40% off of all plans when you go to Aura, aura.com, aura.com/majority. The link, of course, is in the YouTube and podcast description. Hey, today's sponsor is BetterHelp Online Counseling. They're giving our audience 10% off their first month when you go to betterhelp.com/majority report. BetterHelp gives you access to your own fully licensed and accredited therapist via phone, chat, or video. Now, sure you're aware if you've attempted to go see a therapist, therapists elsewhere have long wait lists. Sometimes it can take you weeks. Sometimes it can take you months before they can see you. But when you sign up with BetterHelp, they match you with a therapist based on your specific needs, and you'll be communicating with them in less than 24 hours. A lot of people found telemedicine to be very helpful, particularly therapy during COVID. And I suspect there's a lot of folks who are just going to stick with that. I found it much more convenient. Obviously, a lot of stress coming out of a pandemic, a lot of stress during a pandemic, a lot of stress when there's not a pandemic. Therapy has been extremely helpful for me. It's always helpful to speak to someone. And once BetterHelp connects you with a therapist, if you find that it's not a good fit, you can switch to a new one at any time for any reason with no additional charge. They have thousands of licensed therapists from all over the country, so they have therapists with specialties that may not even be available in your area. BetterHelp also tends to be more affordable than therapists that you'd find through traditional means. You don't have to have insurance to use BetterHelp, and they have financial aid options for those who qualify. BetterHelp is giving everyone in our audience 10% off your first month when you go to betterhelp.com/Majority Report. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/Majority Report. You can find the URL in the description of this video or podcast, and check it out.
We are back, and I would like to welcome to the program Alexandra Brodsky, author of Sexual Justice, Supporting Victims, Ensuring Due Process, and Resisting the Conservative Backlash. Welcome to the show, Alexandra. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. So I loved your book, and I really appreciated some of the background and reading about how you were at the center of student activism on sexual harassment and abuse as a student back before the Me Too era really was what it is today. And so I guess it's a good place to start if you could tell us a little bit about your background there and how that led you to focusing on this topic.
Sure. So I started college back in 2008, and this was, in some ways it feels like not that long ago, but in terms of the politics of sexual harassment, it really feels like another era. When I started school, I knew that Title IX had something to do with student athletics, and that's basically it. I didn't know it had any protections for survivors of sexual assault. And during my time as a student, I saw how young people could create change on college campuses to better support survivors of sexual assault using, protests and writing and ultimately the law. I was part of a group of 16 students and young alumni who filed a complaint against my alma mater when I was a student, saying that they needed to better follow the civil rights law, Title IX, to protect the educations of student survivors of sexual assault. And that, for me, was a really eye-opening experience, both about the power of the law. I think it's a big part of why I'm a lawyer working on sexual harassment issues today, why I went to law school to begin with. And it was also a way for me to connect with young people across the country on all kinds of campuses, colleges, and high schools, to learn about the common threads through our experiences and what people needed from their schools so that they could continue to learn.
So what were some of those common threads that you were able to find from connecting with other students who shared some of the experiences that you did?
I mean, one of the biggest things that we saw was that everyone learned about their rights too late. People 2 years after they reported to their school or tried to report to their school would say, oh, hey, there's this law, Title IX, that protected me. That meant that the school was supposed to do X, Y, and Z then, but it was always too late. So through a group, Know Your Nine, that I co-founded, we took on the work of making sure that other young people knew their rights. There's so much debate today about the procedures that schools use to investigate sexual assault, and that is in large part the topic of my book. So I certainly think that that's important. But I was reflecting recently on how when we first started, so this is 2011, 2012, our concerns were so much more basic than that. No one was talking about the particular procedures that a school might use because schools didn't have accessible procedures to begin with. No one knew where to report. And when people did come forward, they were so often told, that if they reported, they would be retaliated against. that, instead they should just take time off and wait until their rapist graduated. So, there's still a lot of work to be done in this area, but in some ways, publishing the book has been a nice moment to reflect on really how much progress we've seen over the last decade.
Right. And what sticks out in my mind from that particular time period was the Columbia University controversy, which I remember the focus of that conversation being, oh, well, what about false accusations? And that being a lot of the central focus of conversations around assault and harassment on college campuses in particular. Is that a lot of what you faced when you were trying to maybe focus these conversations in a different way?
Yeah, that was such really a pivotal moment. I think that for so many people, for so many survivors, they saw Emma Sulkowicz's performance carrying that mattress. The whole performance was called Carry That Weight. And that felt like such a moving metaphor for the experience of trying to learn, trying to move around campus and always having this psychological weight to bear. But for a lot of people, you're right, it was they came to the conversation first and foremost concerned about the guy that Emma was accusing and what that experience, whether that was fair to them. And, I think what I have tried to do with this book is to say there are too many people who feel like they have to choose a side, right? They feel like they have to choose that they're on the side of the victim or they're on the side of the accused. And once they choose that side, they're there forever and they can't care about the other. But the truth is that I think that the right position, the position that I actually think, certainly most feminists have is, of course, justice for survivors is incredibly important. Of course, we need to make sure that, whether someone's assaulted in school or in the workplace or whatever, that they can move on with their lives in the way that they want to. And also, of course, it's important that people accused of these harms are treated fairly, because every kind of allegation should be vetted in a way that's fair to the accused. And the kinds of procedures that the accused are often asking for, the opportunity to tell their side of the story, the opportunity to be heard by an unbiased decision maker, those are the exact same things that survivors have been asking for. So, fair procedures ultimately benefit everyone.
Right. And I guess I want to tackle that question, that thorny question of due process within institutions. Of course, it's a separate, I think, conversation when we're talking about the penal system or the legal system. But I think the word due process in the context of Me Too has been weaponized by people who want to shut down the conversation entirely. And so that's an important note, but it also is a real concern. And I want to have a good faith conversation about it with you, because I really respected how you chose to talk about that in your book and allowed for us to have a path forward talking about due process without making it weaponizing it in a way to shut down accusations.
Yeah, it's so hard. And I feel like I've been dealing with this in the backlash since I was a student. I see it now a lot as an attorney, where so often when you hear people saying, what about due process for the accused? What about due process for men? Really what they mean is it's inherently unfair that you would accuse a man of doing anything wrong. It is inherently unfair that someone might get into trouble for sexual harassment. And that can't be right. And we know that that can't be right. But, I think that it can't be that our response to that is to not care about due process at all. Instead, we have to be able to, hold in our head two ideas: that these values of due process are really important, and also that they're being weaponized. And, it's tricky. I'm not going to pretend that this is easy. It's always been tricky for me to figure out who are the people coming to this conversation in good faith, trying to answer real hard questions about what do we do when an allegation like this is lodged? What does it mean to be fair to everyone involved? And then who are the people who are using this as a dog whistle? And for me, a guiding principle that has been useful is to look out for what I call exceptionalism, which basically means, are people, so there's this history throughout American law of courts singling out allegations of sexual assault for uniquely onerous procedures. So special rules that made it particularly hard for rape victims to prove their cases. And the justification for this, and it wasn't subtle, it was written, the justification for this was that women lie because they feel scorned or they get pregnant and they're ashamed. And so we have to protect men from these dubious allegations. Now, of course, sexual assault allegations are not more likely to be false than other serious crimes, but there's certainly a cultural perception that they are. And luckily, American courts have mostly gotten rid of that exceptionalism, but we've seen how that same spirit infects conversations about how schools and workplaces and the media should treat these kinds of allegations, that they have to be particularly suspicious, that the procedures have to be, particularly onerous. And so in my mind, a clarifying question is this person making a critique about procedure that is where they're concerned about procedures for all kinds of allegations, or are they singling out sexual assault and sexual harassment for special treatment? And that, for me, that singling out is a real red flag, that they're motivated not by real concern for due process, but by rape apologism and misogyny.
Yeah, it's a trope that I've been noticing, honestly, in my critiques of the Biden administration from the left, is when we're talking about procedure, sometimes that is just used to present this faulty notion of institutional obstacles that it sounds so insurmountable when we're talking about procedure upon procedure, and it sometimes convolutes things and people are unable to see the bigger picture. But it really is, I think, a through line in ways to shut down conversations about holding a powerful group, wherever that group resides, accountable. That I don't know. I have a little bit of dog ears for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. The thing that comes to mind for me is that the parliamentarian in the Senate,
yes,
where we have this one person who gets to, because of some wonky procedure, gets to hold up incredibly important federal legislation, and we treat that as though, oh well, that's just the process. There's nothing we can do about it, without looking at what are the values that process upholds. What is the anti-democratic function of that?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a perfect example for what I'm talking about, but I don't want to get too off track. Now, something that I love that you did was, so much of the national Me Too conversation was focused on famous people, Harvey Weinstein and his, of course, oftentimes high-profile victims, sometimes not. And I don't know, other celebrities who were accused of sexual misconduct. And I think your choice not to focus on famous perpetrators and men here was really well placed, because so much of sexual harassment and violence and misconduct that is directed at, say, on college campuses, or in the workplace, that's not going to get a national news headline. And that's where it can be the most pervasive in many ways, because there's not a spotlight on that. I'm wondering if you can expand a little upon those power dynamics within the power dynamic, the kind of Russian doll situation, and how that informed some of the stories you chose to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the book talks a little bit about some examples about famous men. So, Harvey Weinstein, Brett Kavanaugh, because those are stories that we all have access to, right? And even though everyone has survivors in their lives, not everyone knows that they have survivors in their lives. So their sort of most obvious connection to sexual assaults that they know about might be to a famous person. But the truth is that the dynamics there are just so different. So many of the conversations that we have about, let's say, fairness to the accused, when we're talking about famous people, are really just extraordinary and unique circumstances. So the question of, when should a newspaper report on an allegation of sexual assault? How much digging do they have to do? How much proof do they need before they run the allegation in a paper? That's an important question. It's an interesting question. It's one where I think that these concerns about exceptionalism comes up again. But is that going to be applicable to the, more than 150 people in the world who are the most famous? No, of course not. If I'm sexually harassed in the workplace, no one is going to write a story about that. And, so I worry sometimes that we get a little distracted by those questions. Same thing with, I write about the confirmation hearings for Justice Kavanaugh because there was so much interesting discussion about sexual harassment and due process around those confirmation hearings. But ultimately, my conclusion is there's really nothing to be learned about due process from these hearings, either, as a model or as a model of it going well or as a model of it going poorly, because it was an inherently politicized process that just doesn't tell us much about how this is going to work in everyday workplaces or schools. So, what I wanted to pay attention to was how does sexual harassment affect everyday people, either who are victims or who are accused? So one thing that I think has really gotten buried in these discussions is what our debates about sexual harassment and due process tell us about the nature of American labor writ large. So there have been a lot of, especially, in 2017, 2018, there were a whole bunch of articles about, movie stars being accused of sexual harassment and missing out on contracts, and, op-ed columnists saying, well, what this means is men are just getting fired at a mere accusation. And I have no idea if that is true. In a broad sense, I don't think that we have any data to suggest it is. But to me, the actually really interesting nugget of truth in there is most American workers can be fired at any time for any reason. They can walk in tomorrow and their boss says, I don't like, your shirt, you're wearing a blue shirt, I don't like the color blue, you're fired, because most, private workers aren't unionized, don't have those kinds of protections. And so by looking away from Hollywood, looking away from famous accused, and thinking about what protections real ordinary people accused of sexual harassment might need, that actually tells us a broader story about American labor that goes beyond just sexual harassment alone.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to ask you to expand more on that story, because what also fascinates me and depresses me is how harassment can be compounded when someone is targeted by the harasser, and how that can green light and signal to other employees or other people working with that person there's a gang up mentality, and it becomes about domination. Often, say, if the harasser is the boss, and if that influences other coworkers of this person, it's this awful dynamic in which we see in so much of American capitalism, where workers are fighting amongst themselves and the powerful are cloistered off and free of consequences. What were some of the stories that you came across, and how those stories intersected with broader capitalist dynamics in this country? Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. So all workers, or I shouldn't say all workers, but so many workers in the US, their employment is incredibly precarious. And the truth is that generally, the less money you're making, the more precarious your employment is. And so, we see how, I talk in the book about how there are CEOs who have these contracts that say that they can only be fired for good cause. And then it defines good cause. And that means that even if they are found to have sexually harassed someone, it might still be contrary to the contract for their employer to fire them. Now, contrast that with a domestic worker who, let's say cleans houses, and right now isn't protected by federal anti-discrimination law, has no protections in most states against sexual harassment. Or think about private non-union worker who faces an accusation of wrongdoing and just has no way to fight back, has no rights that have been violated if they're summarily fired. And so, I think you're 100% right that what ends up happening there is just, where does the power lie in that workplace? And if the power lies, as it generally does, against the survivor, they're going to be disbelieved. They're going to be retaliated. They might come forward and report harassment and end up being the one who's fired. But if, it's the rare instance where the power lies with the person levying the allegation, or if a workplace just kind of doesn't want to deal with an investigation, all of their workers are, equally dispensable to them, the person who's accused might not have the opportunity to tell their side of the story and be treated fairly, because they just have no legal right to do so.
And so that's a place where, I talk about the law in the book. I draw on principles of what due process means, under American law, but ultimately legal protections for workers, for students are so much thinner than we want them to be that I think we can use due process as an ethical basement, but it's never going to be our ultimate aspiration.
I'm not trying to harp on this, but I just love this angle, and I think it's so important to flesh out just how, one, maybe the lack of union protections for contract workers, gig workers, and we're talking about this in the context of, for example, Prop 22, which we cover on the show a good amount, which is a separate, delivery workers. I'm not sure what the statistics are on harassment for them. Mistreatment is obviously rampant, but just the rise of even non-competes for somebody working in a minimum wage job at a Jimmy John's or something like that, how the structure of contracts and protections, which you just talked about a bit, for lower wage workers have over time deteriorated to such a degree, and protections for higher executives and middle management have increased, that I would imagine that is an under-discussed element of Me Too and harassment, because it's within the context of broader worker protections, which seemingly no one in this country who is powerful and has money wants to talk about.
I entirely agree. And so, to some extent, I think that this goes back to what you were talking about earlier, where there's so much focus on celebrities who, may be subject to terrible sexual harassment, but are just going to be in a fundamentally different position than, an Uber Eats driver who's harassed by a customer. And because they're an independent contractor rather than an employee, it won't be protected by federal law. Their employer will have no obligation to do anything in that situation to protect them. And now there are some states that are starting to protect independent contractors from sexual harassment. There are efforts on the federal level to extend civil rights protections to independent contractors, but right now, incredibly precarious. And then I think, thinking about the accused, it's interesting to me to have seen a lot of concern from conservative critics about how people accused, workers accused of sexual harassment are being treated when they have never spared a sentence in one of their columns for how, workers, how susceptible workers are to unfair termination in general, especially low wage workers. And so it's very clear that what they're really motivated by is a sense that, Me Too has gone too far, survivors are too powerful, which is laughable, and not that they're actually concerned about workers missing out on a paycheck
or it's a way
terminated,
right? Or it's a way to critique Hollywood elites, which is something that's a Tucker Carlson playbook, right? And then you can kind of sprinkle in some Q dog whistles. Oh, look, they're all sexually deviant and the liberal elite, etc. And then that's as far as it goes, of course.
Yeah, 100%. There's such a long story of especially conservatives talking about sexual harassment that only rich white women care about. This came up when Anita Hill testified about sexual harassment, and there's a lot of talk, and Kimberly Crenshaw writes about this, that essentially, this is a white person problem. When, of course, low-income workers, workers of color, are going to be particularly vulnerable to harassment because they lack the structural power in the workplace, because they don't have the generational wealth to fall back on that would allow them to safely speak up, safely push back. Right.
There's a variety of hypocrisies there that we could talk about at length. But I also want to touch somewhat on the gender elements and the racial elements, since we talked about the capitalist elements as well. Now, I think this has been highlighted socially in talking about the Gabby Petito case, where she's the victim, obviously, of a murder, which is awful, but the attention paid to young white women who are missing or killed is amplified to an amazing degree versus how we treat Black and non-white. And and indigenous people in this country who are missing. And then this, of course, the same dynamic socially is in the workplace and in Me Too as well. In your work, how much have you seen the disparity between belief and responses to white accusers, and not just women, of course? This can be men who have been victims of sexual harassment and assault as well, and non-binary people. And then, of course, Black, Latino, indigenous, or Asian reporters of victims of sexual harassment and assault.
I mean, I think that the disparities are really undeniable. I mean, I remember being a young student organizer, so, 21, 22. And it was just really clear that, TV stations wanted a pretty white girl to cry on TV. And that was what they thought made for a compelling story about sexual violence. And when when students of color were talking about their experiences, when undocumented students were talking about their fear of coming forward because they feared that there would be immigration consequences for them, that was a quote unquote alternative story, a complicated story. When non-binary survivors wanted to come forward, when male survivors wanted to come forward, I remember a producer telling some members of our team that was a little too complicated of a story for them to tell. And I think that we see that also in some conversations where it's assumed that justice for survivors is in tension with racial justice rather than a form of racial justice. I think in our popular imagination, race comes into play in sexual assault allegations when it's a white woman accusing a Black man of sexual assault. And of course that happens. And of course there's a terrible history of trumped up allegations against Black men for assaulting white women have been used to justify racist violence. But it's also true that sexual violence toward Black people, and especially Black women, by white people has been a tool of racial terrorism. One of the KKK's go-to forms of violence was gang rape of Black women. And during slavery, Black women and Black men were sexually brutalized. And today we see how, when think about the R. Kelly story, that when Black girls, Black women have tried to come forward about their stories, it's much harder for them to get media attention, corporate attention. In the R. Kelly instance, there were whistleblowers, survivors coming forward for decades before media, the law caught up to that. And so I think we have to just recognize that, again, ultimately justice for survivors is a racial justice issue.
And I guess I want to talk about the dynamic of men versus women as accusers and as victims, and as perpetrators, because of course there is, it is more likely to happen to women as society stands today, but there are male victims who do not get attention and are often treated with really vile derision. And I feel that there is still a gap in understanding about how much of sexual harassment and violence is about exerting power, and people who may not have experience with this have a really difficult time untangling the sexual harassment and violence from sexual, right? That word, there is less of an understanding about how power dynamics unravel themselves in these contexts. So do you mind expanding on that a bit so people have the literacy to understand?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that this is an area where requires a really nuanced response, because, as you said, the truth is that right now, the majority of sexual violence, sexual harassment is, men hurting women. And that's not a coincidence. That reflects broader power dynamics. But there are, people of all genders hurt people of all genders. And in any sort of given situation, gender might not be the primary axis of inequality. So if you have a female boss and a male worker, it is true that that woman is in, has less power in certain ways, but in that workplace, she's got power over the worker. Let's say she can decide whether he gets fired or not. So if she propositions him, that might not fit our idea about how sexual harassment works broadly, but it's going to have the same kinds of effects on, that worker's ability to thrive and to stay in the workplace. And, it's for good reason then, federal civil rights law that prohibits sexual harassment, protects victims of all genders. And one thing that I've seen in my practice as an attorney is that, and I saw as an organizer, was that even though there are fewer male survivors, they face unique stereotypes when they try to come forward. So, I should give the disclaimer that I'm not speaking for my employer here, but we recently had a case on behalf of a really young boy who was sexually assaulted by his classmates in a locker room repeatedly. And when he and his family went to the school, they said, very explicitly, well, if your son were a girl, we would do something about this. But, it's just boys' course plan. It's not sexual assault because it's between boys. And that, in that situation, that was anti-male sex bias that was standing in the way of our client getting the kinds of support he needed, having the school put together a plan to keep him safe, and ultimately was hugely disruptive to his education.
Yeah, that's a pretty despicable response by the school. You want to think that when your kids go to school that there's some protections in place. That's deeply disturbing. And I also just wanted to touch on this notion that I have particular resentment for. So just a forewarning that the way that the white feminist mentality has overtaken this, I think we've done a great job today, and your book did an amazing job of contextualizing Me Too in a way that isn't just about Sheryl Sandberg. Not of course that she came out with these things, but that kind of brand of corporate feminism that I'm allergic to, and also that I have resentment towards, because it is, I think, actually really counterproductive. And there have been reports recently about some of the turbulence in Me Too, with the board being dominated by necessarily women who aren't representative of the same people we've been centering our discussion on today. So I'm just wondering if you have a critique of that you might share with me.
Yeah, so I've been following the story about the Time's Up board closely, and I've got to say, I think that... I'm
sorry. Yes.
Oh, yeah, no. It's all, it's various hashtags, some of which have been useful and some of which have been questionable. Right. And I should say, I think that the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, which is sort of the legal wing of that organization, has been really effective. But I'm grateful for some of their efforts, but this sort of freestanding Time's Up board, I was really disturbed to hear them explain their mission recently, which was very explicitly, well, we're powerful women, and that means we know powerful people. And so we'll use our connections to powerful people, and particularly powerful men, to make change. And the CEO, who just stepped down, was incredibly derisive about people who create change from the outside. She described it as, it's not useful to just be, yelling from outside. You got to get in the room. But first of all, that is an incredibly ahistorical view of how social change has happened. Generally, it is, there's never change that happens without a grassroots movement behind it. And also, I don't know if your whole idea of the value that you bring is knowing powerful men, I don't know how you could ever actually be disruptive. Because anything you do to threaten their power is going to get you kicked out of that room where that you think is the most important thing in the world. So that just seems to me like a fundamentally flawed vision of change making.
Right. It certainly does. And the whole lean-in mentality is something that I think is quite difficult to square with actual change. But to each their own, I guess. I wanted to kind of end with a path forward, right? We I think talked a good amount about, one, we did touch on due process at the start, but all of the different shades of sexual harassment and assault. And I think a lot of people who are maybe just passively following the news about Me Too feel there's a hopelessness or there's not necessarily a clear understanding of how we can move forward by being fair to the victims and, of course, giving due process to the accused. What is your, I guess, bullet-pointed proposal on how to address this conversation in the future?
Oh, I mean, I will say in some ways, this is just going to betray, how law has shrunk in my brain in some ways, but I find a lot of hope in specificity. I think that when you follow the movement, when you follow the backlash as a culture war issue, as it's laid out in The Atlantic and Slate and all of that, it can really feel intractable. It can feel like there's been, this backlash that maybe has something to say for it, and you've got to pick a side, and there's no way we're ever going to find a solution that works for everyone. But if you really sit down and think, what do workers need? What do students need when they experience sexual harassment or when they're accused of sexual harassment? There are a lot of concrete fixes that are low-hanging fruit. Again, sort of the basics of give everyone the chance to tell their side of the story. Make sure that they get a chance to, provide their evidence. Make sure that they know how the process is going to work and are ultimately, the decision is made by unbiased decision makers. And that's going to benefit everyone. And, I will say also what gives me hope is that it can feel like we have been having this debate forever. I feel like we've been having this debate forever. But, in federal law prohibiting sexual harassment, it's just a couple decades old. Coeducation in higher ed, just a couple decades. We've seen that there are so many workplaces and schools that just over the past couple of years, for the first time, said, hey, maybe we should have a real sexual harassment policy. So I think that remembering that we're really at the start of this, we're at the start of getting it right. And that doesn't mean that we should have patience when institutions screw up. That doesn't mean that the problem isn't urgent, but we shouldn't throw up our hands just because we haven't perfected policy yet.
Yeah, and allow for messiness too, which is when activism is at its start. That's really what you have to expect. And sometimes I think people trying to detract from it point to the messiness to say, oh, it's impossible. But actually, that's just the function of what activism is like when things start out. But Alexandra Brodsky, author of Sexual Justice, Supporting Victims, Ensuring Due Process, and Resisting the Conservative Backlash. I really appreciate your time today. What a great discussion. Thanks so much, Alexandra.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be talking a little Tucker Carlson. So I feel like we haven't checked in on Tucker Carlson recently, and he's had some doozies. But last night he had a segment in which, I don't know if projection is even the right word to talk about or encapsulate his commentary here. Tucker Carlson wants you to know about eugenics. He wants you to know about...
It's on his mind.
Yeah. He wants you to know about the Great Replacement, which is a white supremacist theory that has its roots in early 20th century European nationalism and then was adopted once again by white supremacists in the United States. If you recall, the Jews will not replace us chant in Charlottesville, the rhetoric around Muslims in this country, around Afghan refugees, around Black people, around Native people, around Latino people at the border, of course. This rhetoric has been dominant and has been pushed forward by Tucker Carlson regularly. But he doesn't want you to know that he explicitly endorses eugenics. He doesn't want you to think that. No, he doesn't want you to think that he explicitly believes in the Great Replacement white supremacist theory and that he regularly promulgates it on his program. He just wants to accuse the other side of adopting those ideas so that his viewers have eugenics and Great Replacement in their brain, and then when they choose to adopt what they perceive as the flip side of those concepts, it's quite acceptable to believe in eugenics and the Great Replacement because, look, Biden's doing it, and this is just our version. This is what Tucker had to say last night.
An unrelenting stream of immigration. But why? Well, Joe Biden just said it. To change the racial mix of the country. That's the reason. To reduce the political power of people whose ancestors lived here and dramatically increase the proportion of Americans newly arrived from the third world. And then Biden went further. He said that non-white DNA is the, quote, source of our strength. Imagine saying that. This is the language of eugenics. It's horrifying. But there's a reason Biden said it. In political terms, this policy is called the Great Replacement, the replacement of legacy Americans with more obedient people from faraway countries. They brag about it all the time, but if you dare to say it's happening, they will scream at you with maximum hysteria. And here you have Joe Biden confirming his motive on tape with a smile on his face.
So look at what he's doing there. That is not the definition of the Great Replacement. Or the Great Replacement theory, as defined by the ADL, is what I just explained, is that it has been a white supremacist theory used to justify nationalist and extremist racist policies for decades and has been quite prevalent on the Tucker Carlson program. In fact, the Great Replacement theory and language associated with it has been used by a variety of white supremacist terrorists and mass murderers in this country and internationally. The Tree of Life murderer who killed over 10 people at the synagogue in Pittsburgh a few years ago was echoing Great Replacement language. The New Zealand mosque mass killer who killed tens of people posted his manifesto online, and he talked about the Great Replacement explicitly. This is not a Biden left theory, but Tucker wants you to hear the words Great Replacement. He wants you to hear the words eugenics. Do your own research, aka go to one of those white supremacist forums that his ex-writer wrote on and talk a little bit amongst yourselves about your own version of the Great Replacement. Like, that is as gross as it gets.
Well, he's mapping it to the Republican Party and turning the average Republican into Nazis, or white supremacists. This is why when we were talking about how much Muslim refugees we should take from Afghanistan, for instance, he said, is this a plot for the Democrats to steal elections? Which is the exact same thing he's saying about Haitian
They can't vote,
refugees.
but yeah.
Like, is this a plot to steal elections? And that's his constant refrain. And it's interesting that certain people that appear on Tucker Carlson show will say things like, oh, this is the exact same thing as Trump did. I'm thinking about like Glenn Greenwald, for instance. How many Haitians should we take in? How many Haitians are you going to go on Tucker Carlson's for and advocate that we take in? Because I think we should take in quite a few. Maybe that's unpragmatic. I'm not sure where Glenn stands on things these days with regards to bringing in refugees. But Tucker wants them stopped before they get here. So he's probably very happy about rumors that we're reopening Gitmo to detain people. And he'd probably be happy with Mexico sinking them in the Gulf of Mexico before they even reach land. But I wonder, like, so yeah, Biden and Trump are doing the same thing. We agree with that. On the left, we agree with that. You can also agree with that on the right and use it to defend Trump. I wonder which way the people that go on Tucker Carlson show regularly feel about immigration.
Right. You know, Matt, what if you're truly trying to make change in this world and you're appearing on Tucker Carlson's program and you choose to call out regularly that the Biden administration is being as demonic as the Trump administration was on immigration. They are being as ridiculous, and you don't hear the liberals calling him out in the same way, right? Okay, you want to point out that hypocrisy? Fine. Then go on Tucker Carlson's program and advocate for the taking of hundreds of thousands and more of refugees, because if this is actually politics and not just a vehicle for you to sneer at liberal hypocrisy, then you would be advocating for that. But then you get uninvited from Tucker Carlson's program, and that might be a little bit of a dent in your wallet.
Yeah.
So you're not going to do that.
So instead of we talk about COVID being used by the security state to destroy civil liberties. We're going to go to college campuses to look at temporary COVID procedures for that. Michael Tracy and Glenn Greenwald is going to say you're a great journalist for doing that. And none of you mentioned Title 42 or where you stand on expelling people basically because they're not white. I mean, I would maybe spare a thought for Title 42 if you're a civil libertarian these days.
Yeah, right. And also another reminder for the 500 millionth time. No matter what you do, no matter how vile you are to Haitian asylum seekers along the border, and you have Jen Psaki going on morning shows where she knows she'll get softball questions in order to defend the brutal treatment of Haitian asylum seekers at the border. No matter what you do, guys like Tucker and the right-wing media are going to pretend that you're being soft on the border, so you might as well do the right thing. He's doing this segment claiming that Biden is trying to replace white people in this country, or projecting about the great replacement theory onto him, essentially, that this is what it
mapping
always
it to
boils
electoral
down to.
politics for Republicans, which is the dangerous thing about it.
Yeah. As you see the images of the Border Patrol officers on horseback and their treatment of Haitian asylum seekers at the border, I didn't watch the whole Tucker Carlson program last night, I'm sorry, or the rest of this week, but I didn't really see those images coming out because his bloodthirsty audience may like it. It gets in the way of the narrative, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, Tucker says nobody can defend this. Like, the only problem Tucker has with those like shanties under a bridge is that they're not like deep in Mexico, or those Haitians weren't like, stopped way before that point in a similar brutal fashion where we just wouldn't have images about it. Right.
That, Tucker is unhappy that Biden didn't heed the wise advice of Donald Trump and put crocodiles in the Rio Grande.
And you have Sean Hannity out saying like, actually, some are getting through. It's just like the most disgusting, vile, fascist sort of rhetoric, and it's despicable. And I think Jimmy Dore, where do you stand on Title 42? What are you going to say about Title 42 and how many refugees we should take on Tucker Carlson show? Or is this just about liberal hegemony and, moderating social media? And cultural resentment towards liberals, which is, that's the most important thing in the world. Did you know that, Matt? If that's your takeaway from this, that, it's the same, you're just naturalizing it and basically defending Trump, in my opinion. That is true. All right, Peacock viewers, we will see you tomorrow, and Sam will be back with us for this Casual Friday. See ya. And for the rest of us, we are going to head into the fun half. As a reminder, join the Majority Report, become a member. We rely on your support to continue to do this show, and we would really appreciate it. And of course, if you would like to call in, I am turning off the voicemail here, so everyone will be able to call in 646-257-3920. We will be taking a few calls, reading some IMs, talking about some more shenanigans. And Brandon is here. Brandon.
Hello, Emma. I am here. I heard there'd be shenanigans.
Yes, you always flock to the shenanigans, and so that's why I said that. Got you, like, on a hook. Matt, what's up, man?
How you doing?
I'm doing well. What's happening over on Doomed?
Oh, well, last night we did a stream. Usually we do Thursday nights, but sometimes you got to do when the guest is available. And we had a great show last night at youtube.com/Matt Binder. You could catch the replay there. I had on Max Chafkin. He recently wrote a book about Peter Thiel. It's called The Contrarian, and we did a deep dive into Thiel and his history, his early life, his early political leanings, really everything you ever wanted to know about the guy, the guy who basically shut down Gawker and was the most prominent Silicon Valley backer of Trump, was there for a lot of the private meetings that Trump held with people like Mark Zuckerberg. And the book goes into some details of what those meetings were about. It's just really fascinating interview. YouTube.com/Matt Binder. It'll be up as a podcast later this week at doomedcast.com. Check it out.
Is it about how he's fighting a valiant war against censorship?
Oh, yes, of course. We did bring up Rumble and Greenwald defending Peter Thiel and being one of his biggest supporters, it seems.
Not only supporters, but also supporter of like Thiel invested candidates. And also, I'll just say Brett Weinstein, also one removed from Peter Thiel, defending him occasionally, or at least engage with him on Twitter. It's interesting. Just little patterns about Peter Thiel.
The Gawker thing doesn't seem to come up in these free speech conversations.
Well, Glenn used to, I think, be anti what Peter Thiel did to Gawker, but he started sharing a lot of anti-Gawker sentiment in the last year. It's been odd. If you search his tweets.
Right. And, you should also know that Palantir basically put together this whole little promotional package to take out Glenn Greenwald back in the day. He was a big target of theirs, and they had a whole little project to go at him. And, look where we are now.
Not so much now. Brandon, what's happening over on the discourse?
Well, we put out a new episode last week for Patreon subscribers, and we're going to be recording tomorrow. So ideally, we'll have a new episode out before too early next week. But, frankly, I want to say that we've been receiving a lot of positive support for the quality of our episodes so far. And we're, very humbled by that.
Okay. Good to know. I'm sure that the positive support is warranted. All right, folks, we're going to head... Oh,
wait, I need to
sorry, Matt. Sorry, Matt. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my bad.
So last night we have David Gerard.
I saw that. I was very pumped.
He's great. He is so fun. He's so funny. We talked about not only, cryptocurrency and the speculative nonsense of it, but also the more sort of rational things like blockchain and smart contracts and how those are also silly nonsense. So we probably won't, satisfy people who want us to look into that as if it validates crypto, but we did look into it with David Gerard, who's a great thinker and writer on these topics. We also talked about more of this border stuff and how basically Biden is giving Tucker Carlson exactly what he wants with this Title 42 stuff and all the, it's basically enabling border brutality, and it's pretty disgusting. And like we mentioned earlier, getting mad at the people that say this is the same. Well, which way is this, Tucker? If you can't defend it, then which way are you criticizing it? Are you saying we should let Haitians in and humanize this border process, or are you saying lean on Mexico so they stop them brutally before we see this, which is what the Tucker Carlson view is. Anyway, we talked about that. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning, and we also talked about Steven Crowder has basically a FBI critique for babies. I don't know if people watch Nathan Fielder, but FBI critiques for babies, where you think the guys with guns are good, and the guys pushing pencils are the only bad guys in the FBI. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning to hear that.
Yeah, Matt, I was trying to censor you, but you created a Rumble account and you got around that censorship there with Left Reckoning. Okay, 646.
We should. I mean, I think I'm going to create a Rumble account. I think I'm going to get on there.
I'm not going to belong to any website called Rumble. It sounds like a dating site. It sounds like a site where you meet people to fight and screw.
Well, it sounds like Bumble, yeah, but instead of the what is it? The women asking them out, it's the women saying, "I'll punch you in the face."
I haven't looked into it. Either the fake app I've invented in my own head called Rumble or the real one.
646-257-3920. See you all in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back. back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back, 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 back. Boy, back. And the alpha males are back, 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 back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back, back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back, 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 back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back, 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 back.
You are a madman!
And the alpha males are back, back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them, fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black African. And the alpha males are black, 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 black. And the Africans are back, 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 back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are black, black. Africans are back, back.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. We were talking about the movie Tenet in the break, and I was grabbing a bite and didn't hear the full extent of it. Brandon, what did you think? You said Robert Pattinson is your hero? Question mark.
Yeah, I think he's my personal inspiration for like an actor. Loved him in Tenet. Loved him in The Lighthouse. I think I'm really excited for his Batman. He looks very dirty and grimy in it, which is what I like. You know, reminds me of Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman from the original Batman movie. Well, not the original Batman movie.
He's a good actor. The Lighthouse was good in.
Yeah, I love Lighthouse was good. But for Tenet, you know, I thought it was pretty fine. I think that the dialogue was really badly mixed and also badly written. But I think that I have a pet theory about Christopher Nolan that he just tells people his movies are based in real science so that they think that his poor like writing is like, oh no, it's not badly written. It's just like, you know, real science or something. That's why it's confusing.
Yeah, no, not Inception. No, well, Interstellar was way worse. Inception's still kind of funny.
Inception was the same thing though. I remember going to that because I lived with a bunch of film majors in college, and they were all loved Inception. And it's like we went to it like 3 times in theaters, and I think everybody wanted it to be deeper, than it was.
Yeah.
And I think that's a Nolan movie thing.
I think that he holds himself back by trying to appeal to that like Neil deGrasse Tyson YouTube video breakdown of the science in my movie crowd that like appeared in the late 2000s. Like I just want more colors. Tenet should have had more colors, should have had less talking, a lot of talking in Tenet, should have had more explosions. Really missed the boat on that one. Everyone sounded like a Bane in Batman The Dark Knight Rises, which, you know, is funny for a second and then it gets kind of annoying when you're trying to understand.
You didn't see it.
I'm gonna
bad dialogue and poorly mixed really is the poor food and such poor portions.
Because you try to hear it and then like you go, okay, I got to really hear it because if it's, it must be important. And then you hear it and it sounds like a Doctor Who. You're like, oh, okay, so it's not real science. It's just like Doctor Who bullshit. So then why was I bothering? I would say though, if you liked Tenet, I think, a similar style of movie is Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor, which I watched right after Tenet, blew me away. Really, really loved it. I think everything that Tenet did wrong, Possessor did correct.
Nice. Rory Gatto. I went to a mediocre suburban high school in North Jersey, just outside NYC. Wonder where that is. I remember learning in high school history that Nazis were bad and that white supremacists are bad. Didn't everyone learn that? Apparently not Tucker Carlson. Scam Seder. Did you catch Brett Weinstein on Glenn Beck's show? I did not, but maybe we'll pull that for tomorrow. We also have to save certain things for tomorrow, including a one Jones of Alex doing a video on Sam and I. So
I like how he watches you guys. It's very interesting.
You should go on and ask him why he's a CIA shill. Ask him why he's a plant.
I should. The thing about it is that he did. I get grossed out responding to him because he did one video about me a few years ago where it was like really just gross comments about how I looked, and I don't want to ever think about that again. So, but we will.
I'm so sorry about that, Emma. We were really trying to turn over a new leaf. Here, followers, be more respectable women. That was out of control.
He just sounds like Dr. Girlfriend when he speaks because of his.
Woke Alex Jones would be a pretty decent character for you to do.
We want to balance humor and inclusivity.
We are international here at InfoWars.
I feel like, he's been really, since he got removed from all those sites for the Sandy Hook truther stuff and, just the ecosystem of far right people like doing harassment videos online has just become so much more diverse. Like, I feel like he's taking a real back seat. He's got to up his game.
Yeah, well, now apparently he just YouTube searches himself and then responds to people talking about him. That's kind of what he's been reduced to at this point.
Well, it's tough because he sort of did, the involuntary Rogan, where Rogan took a bunch of money to, go to Spotify, but Alex Jones got banned from everything. But the effect on your audience is basically the same, and that's why you see Joe Rogan doing things for attention like the ivermectin bullshit.
Right. Innuendo. Holy crew, FYI, Doomed was in an episode of Best of Left, which is how I first found this show in 2012. I think it was a clip about Alex Jones and 9/11 conspiracies. Look at that, Matt. We're full circle.
That's cool. I wonder if I want Left Reckoning to get on Best of the Left, because Best of the Left is how, I don't know if it's the very first way I heard a Majority Report, but it was integral to getting me to start listening to on a regular basis.
All right, you want to do some of these clips? We can save Matt. Just let me know.
I'll come to the chair.
Okay. All right. Matt is going to have a rare on-camera appearance here, because he has strong opinions about this Tucker Carlson clip. Yes, I love when this happens. Are we situated in the right way so it looks like I'm looking at you?
That's it. Bradley, could you maybe drag and drop?
You're getting behind the scenes here, folks. This is how the technical stuff happens.
Yes.
Ooh, look at that. Whoa.
Oh, no.
Give me like motion sickness for a second.
I know. And this is the high-tech stuff here.
Did the Majority Report buy themselves one of those cameras from the Matrix where you get the 360 view?
We did. And sometimes when it goes to sleep, it does that. And then Sam, on air, has to zoom in on himself. Goes a little too far sometimes. Look at that. We've got Matt. Oh, I wish I had access to the soundboard. But I don't think you're
Hello, everybody.
Yourself. There you are.
Could you zoom in?
I can, yeah. Boo.
Here we go. Let's go. Oh, wow. Look at that.
This is real fancy stuff.
Panning down, zooming in. Whoa.
I have like a webcam on like a stack of books, and it's just it's just like Dostoevsky, Steinbeck, and it's just like, then it's like a camera.
Oh, well, that's very intellectual of you.
They're not my books. I don't read.
Got it. So, all right, we did not choose to talk about this yesterday, but Michael Tracy was on Tucker Carlson's show on Tuesday.
Oh, I thought we were doing the Crowder clip, but anyway.
Oh, well, no, we can. I thought that was what we wanted to talk about.
Do Crowder.
Okay, Matt, off the camera, redo everything, get back to your seat.
I'm here for Tracy.
All right, so we'll do both. Michael Tracy went on Tucker Carlson's show a few days ago to talk about college campuses and their COVID precautions as something that's equivalent to, say, the Patriot Act, which is treated as a legitimate thought on Fox News. Now, here he is complaining about these precautions, and I think we are going to expand a little bit on our rant earlier about some of these types going on Tucker's show who talk about authoritarianism. But
COVID authoritarianism, what do you choose to emphasize? You go to the college campuses? Or
right.
do you go to maybe the massive violence at the border right now?
Right. Where are the power centers that you choose to focus your ire towards? Tracy has chosen Connecticut College.
And yet, more and more what's happening is that because these college administrators have chosen to impose this incredibly intrusive surveillance testing regime, what happens is that those regimes inevitably come up with positive test results. So students sometimes are required to submit to tests twice a week. And because COVID is becoming an endemic disease, and often these students don't have any symptoms, or if they do have symptoms, they're extremely mild. Nonetheless, when they give in their mandatory nasal swab, that produces a positive result. And what happens? Well, these college bureaucrats overreact. They declare that there's been this very scary and alarming outbreak on campus and move to enact these swift interventionist measures. And these measures, as you might predict, usually do not hold up to any kind of rational scrutiny test whatsoever. At Columbia,
interventionist, curious usage of that word. Also, this is right up Tucker Carlson's alley because he got his bona fides at the start of his career with this college campus agreement thing that has been fine-tuned for quite a while with conservatives. But you just got to say those words, right? What did he say? What did you just point out? But one, the college campus thing, he'll always be sympathetic towards, and then of course you just have to talk about authoritarianism, but not at the real power centers. And then you're good.
It's the intervention of these folks in the bureaucracies of our small liberal arts colleges.
Yeah.
That really takes me back. I remember circa 2014, and I talk about this all the time, when you could just turn on YouTube and get suggested a video of like some guy reading the course listing at a small liberal arts college in like a British accent or something and going like, blimey, postmodernism has done it again. And like that just had 250,000 views. And it's just like, they're so obsessed with college campuses. Like I never think about college because, I'm like 30 and, I can barely remember college, but I think they have their finger on the pulse of the, truth that they're becoming a little bit less, and by they, I mean far right media, a little bit less respected and more derided and, risible on these campuses. Like people just, they're no longer engaging in good faith with Charles Murray. They're just laughing at him because we've moved way far past that. And for them, they just think they have a right to be constantly litigating the same things. And, that was a nice vague story about something that's going on a college campus, but there were just no facts there.
It's a giveaway that they emphasize this in the exact same show where they're basically they're criticizing Joe Biden because he hasn't leaned on Mexico to stop Haitian immigrants farther away from the border, and basically defending Title 42 expulsions that Trump put in. It's a tell. It shows their priorities in their project, in my opinion.
Hey, I just want to say I could hear in my head a very specific YouTuber that I'm assuming Brendan is talking about. It's Sargon of Akkad. But anyway.
I don't really know who that is. I don't actually watch any YouTubers. I just, in my head, I just think that like British accents were very popular around that time because like anything said in a British accent, that's like the joke. It sounds smart. And so people were just not unpacking how, ignorant a lot of these statements are.
Right.
When you say something in an Australian accent, people just don't take it as seriously for obvious reasons.
Also, like, do you remember when you were in high school and there would be you might remember this. Remember you were in high school, and there would be like the graduates from that school who were in college who came back to like visit the teachers, and you would think to yourself, like, you would think to yourself exactly that. What is wrong with these people? Why would you ever care about high school once you're out of here? I would never go back. I never did. I sort of look at people who are grown adults in their even like 20s, let alone 30s, 40s, 50s and beyond, who care so much about what's going on at college campuses. Like, I cannot think of anything that, like, listen, it's, if you worry about like what kids are being taught or whatever, maybe there's something there. But in terms of what Michael Tracy's specific thing is, and that is the college campus experience, why the fuck does he care? Why? It's just so weird. So weird.
It's not that he cares. It's that the people he's selling Substack subscriptions to are really anxious, and they think that's where it's all going wrong with America.
Why do they care either, though? Like, they're not. It's not like Michael Tracy is hip with the college audience and just happens to have thousands of Substack subscribers who are in college. Like, that criticism goes to them too. Why do you, as a grown adult, look in the mirror and ask, why do I care of whether or not 18 to 21-year-olds at a college campus are able to play basketball in the gym court without their masks on? Why do I care?
It's a useful way to make authoritarianism about the left and left culture. We're not looking upward. We're not looking at institutions. We're not looking at the military-industrial complex. We're not looking at the what we prioritize in terms of our federal budget. We are looking at culture on the left, which is centered in college campuses filled with idealized youth who are obviously getting indoctrinated by their professors.
Yeah, I mean, the right needs a false consciousness narrative to explain why, for instance, like Donald Trump and Republicans are extremely unpopular to the point where they need to gerrymander and disenfranchise voters to be competitive. And Tracy's basically a crypto Republican, and you want to sell people an idea that, oh, these college bureaucrats that are turning your kids away from the right path, and that's really all this is.
Yeah, I think that there is, you can look at a core of it as a fear of this, an anxiety surrounding this like loss of like cultural hegemony around what they consider to be like, appropriate conservative norms in our media and advertising as well. Because, it's all part of that same bucket. Like, college kids are getting woke. And so, they have to put interracial couples in Cheerios ads. And now, conservative actors are being purged from Hollywood. No one wants to see John Voight in the new Iron Man movie or something. And so, yeah, like, there is a core of it where they're afraid that this might lead to some kind of like actual power dynamic change. But then I think, now that we've entered the world of social media and all of these sort of grifts, it's also just like, well, it appeals to the fans of this sort of thing as well. But I do not like that I'm not I'm not as cool as these woke Democrats. Like, for people who are actually engaged in material concerns, like where the power centers actually lies. Like, yeah, America's a conservative hellscape. All of these neoliberal institutions are no way, leftist. But for some people, they're concerned that even just that little core of liberal idea and students are going to cause change down the line, and that like they can't get laid in DC because everyone knows they worked for the Donald Trump campaign. It's like it's both very juvenile but also very Gramscian in its understanding of power, I suppose, because it is it's just by nature of demographic shifting that it's more like things that were common sense about like race and gender and that stuff are no longer common sense, and that makes some people feel bad and makes some people alienated by nature of their beliefs and their desire to like constantly shout those beliefs on college campuses.
Right. I think all that actually plays into the fact that they're greatly unhappy with their lives as is. They long for what they remember as the good old days of back when they were in high school or college. So they're living vicariously still, like just like I said, the college student who goes back to their high school, the grown men who always bring up their college football days or whatever, the same sort of thing happens, I'm sure, with a lot of these people.
Definitely. And it's also a lot of that never Trumper phenomenon, I feel, where like a lot of conservatives, at least that like sort of higher level of navigating the political media establishment, don't like hanging out with the people who share their ideology. because they view them the same way Trump kind of viewed his like most fervent base as, reprehensible. He doesn't want to hang out with them because they're like in his mind losers. And a lot of conservatives feel the same way about the people who they claim to represent. And so instead they demand that they be let into the social groups of people who view things differently than they are, inherently differently than they are, because they just don't want to hang out with the people who are more like them ideologically, because they remind them of, sometimes Nazis, sometimes like the classism is a issue as well. And I just don't think that's a functional political atmosphere to like sort of give credence to.
Yeah, I'll just say like the taking issue with surveillance of a virus, like that, basically what Trump was saying. Sometimes it's better not to know if you got it, just maybe you'll get over it. And look, I got some advice, Michael. You got a new delightful girlfriend. Sometimes it's better not to know. Don't test her too much. Don't test where she was on Thursday night. Don't test, because sometimes better not to know. Just move on. Everything will be safe and everyone will be happy if we just don't test things.
Michael's upset because his delightful girlfriend, who is in college, might have tested positive and was wondering where she was the other night. All right, well, we don't know that. I misinterpreted what Matt's pet project segment was. I thought that was the Tracy clip.
No.
The reality is that it's really about Steven Crowder and Dr. Jordan Peterson, who you do a pretty bang-up impression of. The nasal voice is quite prominent. They had a discussion about stereotypes about people from Quebec and Montreal, and the contrast between the two of them was a bit interesting.
Well, like with the Jason Whitlock video we played a while back, like Crowder is too bigoted to have long-form conversations really with anyone, not only a black man like Craig Whitlock, or Jason Whitlock, sorry, but he can't do it with Jason Peterson. Peterson's too cosmopolitan.
Jordan Peterson.
What am I saying?
You said Jason Peterson and Craig Whitlock. Ooh,
That actually reminds me of something. Did you know Steven Crowder played the brain on Arthur for like a season?
Yes.
In my head, this is my question, totally off center. I'd always imagined the brain was black. He's a bear, obviously, in the show. But in my head, he was like a black bear, was a stand-in for black bear. So I've always imagined that Crowder was voicing a black child and on the air, just off the cuff.
That would for him, I think, actually.
Can't comment on that one. Never even occurred to me about the race of the animals on Arthur.
Well, I'm a lefty, so I'm always concerned about the id poll of animals on my show.
So, all right. Well, long story short, though, Crowder's bigotry is not just reserved, of course, for black people. He's even uncomfortable when his level of bigotry towards people who live in Montreal is not shared by Jordan Peterson. Yeah. And this clip is indicative of that kind of discomfort.
Yeah, you'll see Jordan participate in some light ribbon of Quebec that gets him involved in some basically trauma, racialized trauma that Steven has.
But it is a really, really good show, and there is definitely a Canadian bent there, just because it absorbs. It's a character in and of itself, even though it's set in Seattle. We all know what it's like out there in Western Canada. I kind of only have heard tales because I grew up in Quebec, where we're not really witty and bonded. They're mostly just loud assholes.
And they speak French too, which is really unforgivable.
It really is unforgivable
in this day and age. It's like get on board, guys. It's like join the rest of the world.
Oh, it absolutely. See, I'm not even joking though when I say that. People used to get furious when I would point to Quebec as an example of multiculturalism versus the melting pot in the United States gone wrong. And I would talk to Americans when I lived in New York, and I would say, "Do you realize you can just go 30 minutes north to the border, and you can go into a country with its own culture, different language. They don't speak a word of your language. You can't read a word of your language. They don't watch the same shows."
So I'm wearing my Montreal Expos hat. I've been to Montreal. I've done that where I've taken that drive. And not true at all that they don't speak
English there.
Any English at all. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about.
Don't all of the signs have to be in both languages?
Yeah, I mean, I don't recall. I feel like there's a lot of French on the signs, but yeah, I think you're right that you can very easily navigate in English if you need to. I mean, I certainly didn't have a whole lot of trouble going. It is, as Jordan Peterson says, it's a very great city. Go through Montreal and everything. Anyway, continue playing.
Right, but I like how, people, I think, in Canada, Canadians sometimes will make fun of Montreal, but in this kind of, I don't know, just
they're different.
Easy
They're French,
way,
yeah.
Right? It's it's fun to make fun of the Canadians hockey team, for example, but then he's
like, I'm serious about this though.
like,
actually,
no,
right? When he says that, Jordan Peterson. When he says that, Jordan Peterson, who is Canadian, sort of like, just the look on his face is sort of like, but I thought we were just joking. What do you have to? What are you going to say?
I want to applaud them for taking it to the French language. It's had it too good for too long. People are finally getting it, what it deserves.
We'll give them that. Keep going, Bradley.
It absolutely. See, I'm not even joking though when I say that. People used to get furious when I would point to Quebec as an example of multiculturalism versus the melting pot in the United States gone wrong. And I would talk to Americans when I lived in New York, and I would say, "Do you realize you can just go 30 minutes north to the border, and you can go into a country with its own culture, different language. They don't speak a word of your language. You can't read a word of your language. They don't watch the same shows. They don't know your same celebrities. And they are a part of an English country known as Canada. But you will have gone to Quebec and you won't know that it's Canada. And by the way, they have a nationally representative party whose only interest is to separate from Canada." I said, this is part of the political, and these were a conquered people who the English said, you know what, all right, we'll let you have this, and we go through the plains of Abraham, and I tell Americans, I go, you just don't know. That's why you say, okay, look, French folk, time for you to feather in Canada's English, and then you have the referendums to say, it'd be like tech.
Like, I don't know a lot about Canada's history, but none of that sounds right to me. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the English took over the French Canadian part of Canada, like, I think imposing a cultural genocide on the existing French population probably would have been a little bit outside their capabilities.
They should have put up a wall around Quebec, and any Quebecois that they saw trying to climb the wall should have been shot on sight. That's the only way you can handle this kind of stuff. Big open air prison, Escape from New York, Doomsday, Escape from LA, classic trilogy.
Yeah, they're too busy hunting beavers to extinction to build a wall around the French people and try to contain them. But anyway, continue.
A part of an English country known as Canada. But you will have gone to Quebec and you won't know that it's Canada. And by the way, they have a nationally representative party whose only interest is to separate from Canada. I said, this is part of the political, and these were a conquered people who the English said, you know what, all right, we'll let you have this, and we go through the plains of Abraham, and I tell Americans, I go, you just don't know. That's why you say, okay, look, French folk, time for you to feather in Canada's English, and then you have the referendums to say, it'd be like Texas separating because they wanted to just be Spanish. It doesn't make any sense. Americans aren't understanding this, but Quebec's a silly place. That's my point.
I should say, in Quebec's defense, let's say that Montreal is a great city, and if people in the U.S. want a quick taste of Europe, Montreal is a great place. It's It's truly one of the world's great cities.
It really is.
I love Montreal. I lived there for like 8 years, and it's such a great city. It's so fun. It's got such a dynamic culture. The street life is amazing. It's really, really safe. Like, you could wander around anywhere at 3 a.m. It's no problem. It's beautiful.
Well, I can't. I was mugged twice.
In Montreal?
Yeah, I was mugged over a set of Interpol tickets by a small Haitian. Incidental. I only say it because the story was one that I've told on air. Yeah, I was mugged for Interpol tickets.
This is the funniest.
He was a scalper anyway. Mugged me for the money for the Interpol tickets. And
what would you say?
This is the funniest his show has ever been. I would watch this show. I would watch this show if it was all about Montreal and his experiences and hatred, and then that's a show that we could put money into.
A small Haitian, though. Even though, I mean, I don't know why he.
That's neither here nor there, except for he speaks French as well because he's Haitian.
Yeah, so it's a double thing I don't understand.
Why we're doing this, folks, is like, look, you don't want to be like Steven Crowder.
Right.
Like, if you have to choose, be more like Jordan Peterson, for Christ's sakes.
But yeah.
That's too much of a bigoted heart to enjoy Montreal. I mean, continue playing it.
Right,
actually,
like, what a miserable existence this person leads, as opposed to, overcompensating for all of the other insecurities he has. He can't even enjoy a lovely little taste of Europe and Canada.
Montreal, I don't know. I was there for a week. It seemed pretty safe to me.
But I
didn't try to go to see Interpol.
Right, it looks
anyway.
Interpol, of course. What a great touch.
It's sad.
Aren't understanding this, but Quebec's a silly place. That's my point.
I should say, in Quebec's defense, let's say that Montreal is a great city, and
it's true.
If people in the U.S. want a quick taste of Europe, Montreal is a great place. It's one of the world's great. It's truly one of the world's great cities.
It really is.
I love Montreal. I lived there for like 8 years, and it's such a great city. It's so fun. It's got such a dynamic culture. The street life is amazing. It's really, really safe. Like you could wander around anywhere at 3 a.m. It's no problem. It's beautiful.
Well, I can't. I was mugged twice.
In Montreal?
Yeah, I was mugged over a set of Interpol tickets by a small Haitian. Incidental. I only say it because the story was one that I've told on air. Yeah, I was mugged for Interpol tickets. He was a scalper anyway, mugged me for the money for the Interpol tickets. And then, anyway, the whole point is...
That's really humiliating. That's really humiliating, especially because he was small and it was Montreal. It's like, how did you manage that? And twice.
Do you know how he got away? He screamed. I swear to you, this is true. He screamed out that I was racist, and I stopped chasing him.
I mean, that's good. That should have happened to you. That absolutely.
It absolutely should have happened. This is the true story. Okay, I'm going to see.
You can see God up in the clouds.
Yeah, because I was going. Why isn't anyone stopping him? I was going to see Interpol that night with my friend Carl. It was a band, sort of an indie rock band. I was going to see them at, I believe it was Metropolis or Spectrum, and I was going to what I knew was a scalper. Only he didn't have Interpol tickets, but another guy who, he presented himself as a scalper. Turns out, not all. I don't know if you know this. You have to be choosy with your scalpers. They're not all.
Oh, you mean not all scalpers are honest?
Not all legitimate.
Isn't that something?
Though, ironically, you'll hear at the end of this tale, it was all redeemed through an honest scalper. So this small Haitian man says, "Oh, you want Interpol tickets?" I'm not even going to try and do his accent because people get all mad. But rest assured, he had one. Sounds like most people who are Haitian immigrants in Montreal. And he said, "I got Interpol tickets." And I said, "Okay." He gave me the price, and I said, "It seems a little steep, but okay." So he goes to, I can't remember which hotel. I just remember it wasn't the Queen Elizabeth. It wasn't a hotel I was familiar with. He goes, "I got to go pick them up at the front desk." Right away, I'm thinking, this is weird. He just said he has Interpol tickets. Why would he go to this hotel front desk? So he goes there, and then he goes into the restroom. Again, should have given me a red flag. I'm 16 years old, mind you.
Okay, well, that's a bit more.
Yeah, 16 years old, and he comes out, and then he has, I see him stuffing what's like toilet paper in this envelope. And he goes, "All right, here are the tickets, give me the money." And I said, "No, those aren't tickets." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Those are toilet paper. There's toilet paper envelopes." And he goes, How do you know that?" I said, "Well, I saw you put toilet paper in there." And he goes like, "Man," he walks out. So I go, okay, he walks out the revolving door. And then when I walk out, he's waiting for me. He's like, no, you mistook it. These are the tickets. And he shows what actually looks like tickets at this point. I said, "Oh, okay." So then I hold my money, but I see that he's covering up the name on the ticket. And I said, "Let me see the ticket." And he goes, "Whoa, you don't trust me? You don't trust me?" And he starts making these accusations. And I said, no, just show me the ticket. He grabs the money from my hand. But the good thing is he ripped the $20 bills in half, so it was of no value to him. So I find solace in that. And then he runs out in the middle of the street, and I'm going, hey, that guy just took my money. And I'm at this point 6'1", 6'2", but very skinny. But this guy is all of 5'3", and he's running through the street. And I go, "Why isn't anyone doing it?" And of course, French. "Hey, ferme ta gueule, tabarnak." They're not friendly at all. And this guy just goes, "What? You're saying it because I'm black? You're racist?" And I stop. I'm like, "What? No." And he just ran into an alleyway. And I thought, well, now the alleyway has him now. I'm 16 and it's an alleyway. And then finally I told the story to another scalper who was right outside the Interpol concert. At that point, the show had already started. And he said, "Man, there are some really rough people out there here." And he gave me the tickets because they were of no worth. At that point, the show had already started. He gave me Interpol tickets, which was very nice. But then he said, "Don't trust the Haitians." And I said, "You're racist." That's so it could have been full.
You met the devil scalper and the saint scalper the same night.
Right. Yeah. So the point is, not as safe as you make it out to be. But yes, Montreal is a wonderful city to visit. I don't know that I would ever want to live there again with the taxes, and I don't know that I could raise kids there at this point. I mean,
I loved living there. So
our Times Square is Club Super Sex in Montreal. When I tell people that, I go, "Our Santa Claus parade is going back giant, flashing, neon purple tits." It's not like there's a red light district. It's the whole city. And Americans are like, "You're exaggerating." I go, "Just go visit." But unbelievable restaurants, a lot of fun. So Trailer Park Boys. Okay, this is.
Dude, did they bleep out the word tits?
Yes, they did.
What lamos!
I know.
I'm fascinated by his psychology, right? And how in this just short little segment, he finds a way to mention boobs.
And how he's uncomfortable with how much he has to look at them. Which I've been to Montreal. I remember a bunch of murals. I don't remember just like sex hitting me from all angles of Montreal. I remember Montreal.
That's his constant struggle, right? And
Montreal kind of looks like a set of boobs, actually. So the whole city is just a Satan's play place.
Well, he also is quite obsessed with size. And he's really obsessed with not appearing racist in accusations of racism, even though I'm pretty sure that none of this happened, right?
It's all lies.
He didn't want to appear racist by going after the 5'3" Haitian. He's really, really obsessed with the size of the guy. In reality, we know he was curled up in a fetal position
That is a funny scam to pull on Steven Crowder, though, is to go into a bathroom and stuff an envelope full of toilet paper and say, "Here's your Interpol tickets."
Why would you keep following the guy after he tried to scam you, though? Like, he had an out. Just don't go where the guy was going.
Why?
And he just followed him out still. It was so weird. What a weird thing to do.
Why would you even tell that story, fake or real, in that much detail to somebody who did not ask to hear it? And, you know, I can very much feel for Jordan Peterson, who looks great after the detox, I guess. You know, it looks, you know, he looks way more level. Just like sitting there and like listening to that story and like, wow. And people think I'm crazy. Like, people think I'm a freak.
I mean,
so what a weird story. Like, and it was really long.
If I was like a PR agency trying to make Jordan Peterson look relatable, I would isolate this clip and pass to people like, look at Jordan Peterson's a normal guy. He just has some, you know, horrible opinions about trans people and stuff. But don't ask about what he did with Orban. But he likes Montreal and he can enjoy a European city.
And he can enjoy a city without making it all about your personal aggrievement, which then you can like multiply about everything, right? Like, he got mugged by a scalper when he was 16, so it goes to show that multiculturalism has failed, and actually everybody needs to assimilate to the English speaking hegemony, and they probably should have seceded if they wanted to change French.
But the scalper was Haitian, he wasn't from Montreal. It just happened in Montreal. It's a very weird story, even in his own like.
Well, they both speak French, so you know. Obviously, they're all just wrapped up into one.
Language, yeah.
Exactly.
But wouldn't the other scalper have also been from Montreal then? Who gave him the tickets?
Well, the way Crowder tells the story.
I'm just visiting from Brooklyn. I'm a scalper and from New York, you know. Maybe that's what happened. I don't know.
I know. I'm just interested in the lore of Montreal. The deep lore. This is deep Crowder lore.
Yeah, I mean, I heard somebody, I posted this on Twitter, said that actually all scalpers in Montreal are fairly friendly to them.
Oh.
And it's not the sort of thing where you have to look out for the Haitian scalpers. So
good to know.
Maybe they just knew a dumb mark when they saw one, you know? And
that's another thing is like, are we getting the full story? Did Steven maybe like say something that made him a target? I don't want to blame the victim, but I do blame Steven Crowder for this incident if it actually in fact happened. And I am on the side of the small Haitian man who gave him toilet paper in an envelope, because that is that's a hilarious thing to do. Oh, okay.
Oh, what was that?
Oh, sorry. I tried to close out of this.
The toilet paper part of the story is really weird to me, because it seems like there would be much better, fake ticket material than going last minute into a bathroom and grabbing toilet paper. I mean, unless it is true that like these guys were all just ready to do a pleasant, positive, legitimate transaction with everyone until they saw Steven Crowder and then was just like, we're going to get this guy. Yeah, we're going to get this guy. Last minute idea, folks.
All right, you want to take a call or two, Matt?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go to the phones. 585, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Mike from Rochester.
Hi, Mike. What would you like to talk about?
Yeah, so right now I'm in, my union is negotiating our contract.
Okay.
And I just thought it would be, so I really appreciate you taking my call, and I really appreciate your coverage on labor stories lately. But one of the things that, we hear a lot about labor stories once the workers are on strike, but, I can just give a little rundown of some of what builds up to that. And if you have any questions for me, cut me off, guide me through what you think is interesting,
Sure, go ahead, but try to make it, short and concise.
Oh, okay. Then I can make it real quick. So especially, when we talk about that October one-day strike, when you're a worker, you know, people don't really want to strike and be out of work. You want to really demonstrate solidarity leading up to it. You want to make your demands really clear. So, you know, right now, you know, our current situation is, so right now we're a healthcare worker union, and, you know, our workers haven't had hazard pay. Because of COVID, we extended our contracts, so they've been without a raise for 2 years. And and I actually became a delegate in my union because I was inspired by some of your guys' coverage, especially when Nomi Key has on, you know, Sarah Nelson and the other organizers. So I just wanted to tell you that I appreciate your coverage on those fronts. And so right now we're in negotiations, and I'll be, you know, I can give you an update if we end up out on the picket line for support. We represent the workers over at Strong Hospital, which is the bigger hospital in the region, as well as the campus, because there's a university attached.
Strong?
I'm sorry,
I'm just writing it down. Strong?
Yeah, it's Strong Hospital. It's attached to the university at Rochester.
Okay.
And you know, on our union, it's 1199 SEIU. The campus is 200 SEIU, local 200. You know, if you look historically, Martin Luther King always said we were his favorite union. We're a majority Black union, but very diverse, a huge Nepali and other, you know, population. We're very diverse. Social issues are big with us, but we're really a benefits-rich union. You know, good wages for the workers. You know, yeah. I mean, I really strongly encourage, if I can pass anything on, I just really strongly encourage you guys to, you know, anyone listening, to organize a union, join a union, get involved in your union. Especially when you look at the healthcare mandate, because we're protected, the union workers on our campus, we were able to bargain the impact of that. So it wasn't just like September 27th, you're out the door, which is the case for a lot of healthcare workers. There's, you know, we open up the door for, if people change their mind and get the shot, they can come back. You know, just when you negotiate as a bargaining unit, those are the benefits you get. Yeah, I mean, that's really the gist of what's going down over at the hospital. And you know, we're going to the table with management, and it's pretty exciting. It's really cool.
Appreciate
the call.
Thank you for letting us know, and we'll be monitoring that. That's a part of some of our labor coverage here.
All right, thanks. I really appreciate all you guys' work. I followed some of you guys individually for a long time, but I'll let you get back to it. I'll let you jump.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks so much.
Should we go take another call?
Sure.
Let's go to the phones. 308. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Oh, looks like they somehow lost us. Let's go back to the phones. 818. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes. They're from Jamaica. Don't worry, no accents this time. But I was going to talk about the I think Brandon was talking about how people kind of the whatever that physicist name is, but it kind of incorporates the IDW types, where they kind of want the details in a movie to make sense. And as you said, if it's a time travel movie, it inherently, by its own logic, does not make sense, because, you know, time travel is probably not possible, right?
On what?
Sorry, can you hear me still?
Yeah, I can. I was making fun of the word logic.
Sorry. I'm having a bit of a delay. So
all good.
I think I've seen this attitude a lot, where it affects all sorts of things. These guys are the same people, like when you criticize Crowder rightly when he's complaining about a black James Bond, where the same, if not, while they kind of ignore the actual logic that you can't just stick any old white guy in Russia either, because, you know, they would stick out as well, right? But it's all about kind of meeting this kind of preconceived narrative, but unfortunately, it's very pervasive. You see it even in video games, like there's people complaining about the new God of War because there's a black person in there. And I'm like saying, wait, you're worried about a game that has a Greek god in Norse mythology, but when there's a black person, that's what's breaking your immersion. It's kind of, but I guess my major question is, how do you deal with these types of folks? I mean, like, they're way more prevalent than I would care to admit, because I'm hearing the same stuff even down here. Like, people are saying, well, like, why are they adding a black James Bond? It's has to do with you know, appealing to wokeness or whatever nonsense. I mean, and I'm hearing this from black people, so it's kind of disturbing in that sense. You have any advice when dealing with these folks, or just I should kind of start to avoid them because maybe they need more life experience to kind of change that perspective?
Well, a lot of people who just kind of, I think, are a mini racist, or don't feel uncomfortable with change but aren't active racist, like Steven Crowder. Sometimes they just need to see it happen before to make them feel less scared. And that's kind of my if I speak to them, I'll explain, well, I mean, look at the context. This is why this isn't scary, etc. But other than that, I mean, it just you can only take so much emotional weight on yourself in trying to convert people. So I wouldn't want.
Oh no, it's not so much like I'm trying to convert, but it gets kind of, how can I say, it gets kind of silly at some points, because like it's almost like I'm in arguments with people who are not really. I'm being gaslit. I think that's the term I'm looking for.
Yeah.
It seems like there's lots of people who just live their lives just to win arguments, or at least win arguments in their own mind. And I find it kind of disturbing, like, because like as soon as I know it's that type of person, I kind of begin to tune out. But what is the pull? I mean, they're not even getting anything materially out of it, right? Other than looking goofy. Because like it's just so odd. I'm trying to figure out what is like what in the culture, or what is the reward mechanism of like for them, because like I guess maybe my mentality is different. Like I don't live to win arguments. It's not particularly what you call it, a life goal. So I don't know. Is it like conservative mind? Is it upbringing? What is it? I just can't figure it out.
High propensity towards a fear response is my sense, and sometimes you just
that's a good answer. Yeah,
you literally can't. You can't. It's just so. It's so ingrained that it's difficult to untangle.
Right. And it's going to be different for everybody, obviously, but I think that's a really good, broad way of looking at it, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, just to touch on your point there, Dave, I'm not a very argumentative person, but I think that we have a media culture that is very used to enabling and coddling a very narrow slice of American hegemonic like viewpoints about race and gender and all these things, both because it's just ingrained in our culture, but also because for a long time it was an effective way to make money, and it's still an effective way to make money for some people. But with the rapidly diversifying population, it's not as effective as just doing token appeals to different racial groups, the idea of liberalism, sort of this like social liberal turn that we're taking. However, I think generally speaking, we have a very reactionary culture, and I mean that in the classical sense. Like, people are taught a lot of times, especially by even our critical media, that they don't need to look outward to like other materials to understand what's going on in the world. Like, it's very easy for them, and I think Jordan Peterson was a good example of this, to, you know, if you're smart enough to you just like look around you and examine through your own eyes what you think is wrong, and you can correlate that with like the rapid decline of American society due to capitalism, and sort of replace capitalism with like Black women on television. And because we don't have a critical media or really like a good education system in this country, I would argue, that teaches critical or empathetic thinking, people get very anxious about appearing wrong and get very anxious about, you know, changes to the status quo. Sorry. Changes to the status quo. And, you know, it creates this defensive posture in a lot of people where they have this imagined past, this nostalgia that our conservative media is always talking about, like how things were different back in the day. And now, you know, with all these immigrants, you see how crime is on the rise, even though it's not. And no one is ever really being adequately challenged to like come up with evidence of these things, you know, come up with like, you know, examples of these trends and how they are actually causing causative reactions. Instead, we just privilege these very, very lazy arguments. Like last week, when we were talking about people like saying Obama killed rock and roll. It's like, what a weird statement to make. And like, there's just no follow-up to it. It's just like, it's just a narrative that exists out there in the air. And, you know, I would say just ideally, when you're talking about things as simple as like interracial couples or Black James Bond, people will have their minds changed because like the culture will just change in that sense. Whether or not that actually leads to like real material circumstances changing for the people who are being represented by a Black woman James Bond is probably not likely. But, you know, at a certain point, you're going to have just more and more people raised in a world where that's normal. And what I think we're having a big problem with now, and this is a part of the COVID pandemic issue and the issue of getting real information out there, you know, instead of people being forced to engage with things changing as they are, like demographics changing, they're allowed to silo up in like Fox News or far right media bubbles that are just like constantly, you know, gaslighting them into believing the world is different than it actually is, and stoking that agreement for money and like personal, you know, the personal professional ambitions of a handful of like media professionals. But, you know, it doesn't do those people who are now having to navigate this world thinking that, you know, a Black woman James Bond is the end of society or whatever, any like real benefit. It doesn't teach people, it doesn't really like show any real kindness to like the people you're ideally trying to protect from whatever a Black James Bond represents, to make them so afraid of even the most minor social changes that they obsess over them. You know, it's all very silly, like you said, but some people take it very seriously, and how we engage with those people who have taken it very seriously, I think, is a difficult question when they're able to just go back to little silos, and that will tell them, no, you're right to take it very seriously. Don't worry about where all your tax money's going. You're right to take it very seriously.
Right. And, you know, adding to that, like the, you know.
Sorry to interrupt, Matt.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. No, I was saying, like, I was watching Left Reckoning yesterday, and to relate to when they were talking, I had the guest on with Bitcoin. Right. And, you know, I usually watch the show because it helps me kind of get the talking points I need to kind of try reel some of my friends out of the Bitcoin blockchain fantasy. But it's almost like and I'm very subtle. I'm not like on the phone, no. I'm very handholdly, gentle, and they take any criticism of this technology is almost like I'm defaming a god or something. Like it becomes almost like a
personal attack.
It's like I said something about their mother or something, right?
Right. You know, I think
so.
I think, like, you know, obviously maybe years and years ago, they would, you know, they're your friends, you would see them and you would discuss these things, and they would take what you said maybe, and they would, you know, add it to all their pre-existing knowledge of a certain issue. But today, the fact that they're able to go online and create their own filter bubbles with social media, they have a whole litany of people who, I mean, obviously they don't know them in real life, but they might feel like they know them because they talk to them online, they follow what they say online. And so they hear these people who are like-minded basically hammer these similar ideas. And, you know, it makes your voice just one voice in a, you know, in a room of many thousands to them. And they probably, and those voices are, you know, doubling down on what they already believe. So they probably do look at what you're saying as an attack on, you know, what they consume on a regular basis, which probably leads a lot to their identity and who they really see themselves to be.
Definitely. And, you know, I think just
I guess for me, the sad part is though, for me, the sad part is though, like, while I'm not actively going out, tried to, I'm not being preachy and anything like that. But it is destroying a lot of relationships in that sense, because I generally kind of lose respect for people if I think they're an idiot, right? And the more they do it, the harder it is for me to kind of reach out to them again, because it seems like they're choosing a path, so that just makes them feel comfortable.
I think what you got to look at there, Dave, is a radical never blame the voters, and also don't blame the propaganda. And really all your job is not to, persuade them in the moment, because nobody has the ego really to say, oh yeah, actually you're right, and all this stuff I've been investing my attention toward is bullshit. That is a huge hill for people to climb. All you can do is keep repeating what they need to hear, and hope that over time, like Binder said, like slowly add it to their knowledge base, and it might actually, when probably some other external event happens that shows you probably right, then maybe they'll come around to it.
Appreciate the call, Dave.
Yeah. Before I go, I have to ask you
really quick.
I asked about Brendan though. Yeah, really quick. Your thoughts on Looper? All right, bye guys.
My thoughts on Looper? Pretty good. It's one of those movies that I watched a while back when I first came out, saw it in theaters. Around the time I saw Dread in theater, which was another great movie, and then I thought I really liked it. I still think I really like it. Never seen it again.
Well, okay. Were you not?
I don't even remember which one that was.
My favorite moment is when Bruce Willis fights a baby.
Sometimes you got to fight a baby. That's just the way. That's just what do you consider the left-right debates?
I don't recall any of this.
I'm gonna read some IMs. Fade Away J, regarding Steven Crowder's idiocy. Canada is not an English country. Canada is officially a bilingual country, French and English, 2 official languages. Also funny that Crowder calls out Quebec as being too multicultural when Quebec just passed a law that also bans wearing religious symbols of any kind for any civil servants, a law that was targeted towards Muslims and Sikhs. Moral of the story, Crowder is an idiot.
Wasn't the mosque killer Quebecois as well? I can't remember what his name was, but the guy who was like Ben Shapiro fan.
I do not remember. Short, concise. Guys, it was disappointing to see you ask the caller to be short and concise when you just spent 10 minutes listening to a rando story from Crowder. This is when I miss Michael the most, getting back to focus on issues that matter. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's probably some fair criticism, although I wouldn't saint Michael too much with regards to indulging into long clips like that. But
right. But appreciate the critique. Smoking that Shire loud. Next James Bond should be Wanda Sykes. Really drive up the conservative suicide rate.
The next James Bond should be Haitian and should be destabilizing, Canada, obviously.
That'd be dope.
Kudlow's Trojan Slope. I'm afraid of that. Emma's point on the conditioning to a fear response is spot on. As someone raised to be conservative, I confirm that my own experience that fear was the #1 motivation behind most opinions I encountered.
I mean, look at Steven Crowder in Montreal, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, right. His difficult and scary experience as a 16-year-old informed a variety of extrapolating points about an entire region of Canada.
I think, just at that point, I think you have to be able to speak to people's fears without validating them in the way that, our media tends to do, where someone will say, I'm afraid of, immigrants taking over America and replacing us. And it goes, your fear is justified and I'm here for you. And it's like, well, yeah, you can understand someone's experience makes them sort of anxious about certain things without pretending that anxiety is based in a rational interpretation of what's going on in the world. And I think we're not to that point yet. We've gone too far in the realm of enabling people with any particular thing that they think is reasonable.
Right. Shane from Canada, if you're an asshole, Quebecers will only speak French to you. Well, maybe that's what happened to him. Don't burn this book. Brandon is right, and Arthur the Brain celebrates Kwanzaa. Maybe you saw that episode long ago, Brandon.
Everything I know about Kwanzaa comes from the Proud family, so it's probably not.
I think my knowledge is from Rugrats.
Crypto Bipto. Michael Tracy is a crypto Republican. Sam is a crypto Jew. Spike Lee is a cryptocurrency. Joey from Montana, is Matt getting a head start on No Shave November? I don't know which Matt you're referring to there.
I've already shaved. Well, it's not November yet, I guess.
Yeah, and you've had that mustache for quite a bit.
Yeah, but it's also shorter than it usually is.
Yeah, it is shorter. All right.
But Binder, are you doing no shave?
Yeah, I do no shave every month.
Demian, so Sam didn't want to talk about hot Alex Jones, but I feel like we could definitely do about 9 hours on this. Yeah, if anyone didn't see, I retweeted it about a week ago. Alex Jones as a young person, but you can still see the shadings. He did some news, but I didn't say it. Some other people said it. I didn't say that.
By saying don't say it, you're saying it.
I said don't say it.
Yeah, don't think of Alex Jones as a lust object.
Yeah,
I don't think of a polar.
I do not think of him as a lust object. I was just surprised that he didn't look demented and red in the way that he currently does.
I think it's a shame that every day we move further from the light of God towards what I can only describe as the abyss.
Honestly, if you said that in an Alex Jones voice, you know.
I think it is a that is a that's a good point, Brandon. Josh from Connecticut. Emma, Jack Eichel loses the C. Are we seeing him in NYC sooner or the West Coast? I don't fucking know. I can't, like, one of the most agonizing experiences with a potential for acquisition for one of my teams I've ever experienced. But I don't know. Apparently the Pagulas don't want him traded to the East Coast because they're insane, and they want him to play on the West Coast. But I've never seen a mismanaged, like, he's going to get traded for a Twinkie at some point. It's ridiculous. And also disgusting that the organization won't let him get the surgery he wants. Really fucked up. $100 that Biden didn't say non-white DNA is the source of our strength. Cucker Carlson is really biting into his ass, says pegged Benny Shabibo.
That would have been amazing if he said that on television. I wish the people said would have exploded.
Yeah, Biden's not bringing up somebody's racial DNA, Tucker. That's your thing. That's the thing you're obsessed with.
Yeah, I mean, Biden's quote didn't mention DNA. It was like, it did mention, there's going to be less than 50% of white people in this country, European descent, Biden said. And Biden can be weird when he fixates on race because he's an old fogey. And
right.
I don't feel like Tucker's the guy to criticize that. Yeah.
No. Gravy, this is definitely a question for Matt. Can you talk about the Havana Syndrome House bill? Just a blatant way to funnel money directly into the CIA. It's like so weird.
Yeah,
I think. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll let you go. I don't have much to say about it. Otherwise, I think it's silly, as other people do.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I think it's important that we acknowledge the existence of direct energy technology. 20 years after 9/11, it's finally coming out that the CIA believes in this technology, and they've perhaps had it for a long time.
Well, there you go. I'm gonna read a few more IMs, then we could do one more clip. And damn, we only took 2 calls, but we really did a deep dive into Crowder. So understand the critique, but it was also fun because Matt was excited about it and he got to be on camera, which I always appreciate.
Look, we did an extended Crowder clip, and it is a long one, but I don't regret it because I think it was fun.
I also got my answer about the brain being black, so I feel very vindicated and enriched by the entire experience. So I mean,
I'm glad.
I just want to see
filled from the show today, Brandon.
I'm sorry.
I just want to see. Go ahead.
No, it's fine.
It's important.
Well, sorry, Emma. I guess I talked over you. The delay sometimes in the Zoom, I can't tell.
I'm saying nothing of consequence.
Yeah, I just want to see Crowder like go on like a cable news show where they're all, obviously not, shooting the shit like he was with Peterson on his more laid back show, and literally give that as an answer as to why we should be weary of multiculturalism. The time I got mugged for Interpol tickets.
By which I mean, like there was a weird transaction where he took the money and ran with it. Like I was under no physical threat at any point from this.
He fell for a scam. That's all.
Right.
If that's even if the way he said it is actually how it even went down.
This actually reminds me of something that happened to me. One time I tried to buy drugs and the guy gave me oregano, and that's why I hate Italians now. It's just it's a long story. I won't go into the details of it past that point, but it's real.
I tried to buy pot in front of Parliament in London on that bridge by Big Ben at late one night, and it was that exact same thing. It was like oregano or something like that, and we tried to return the pot.
Oh, did you get a receipt?
And we didn't get a receipt. They didn't give us an envelope full of toilet paper either. But there was like some pushing and shoving going on. And then I think everybody kind of realized where we were was probably one of the most surveilled places in all of the entire world, and walked.
Right in front of the clock on the bridge. Not good. I think
that was smart of you, though, Matt, because obviously that's a good place to meet with someone if you're going to make some sort of illicit, illegal transaction, and perhaps not following the guy into a private bathroom stall to exchange tickets. Probably the best way to go about this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's our final call. I'm just looking at the time, and I have 2 clips that I want to get to. So,
so let's do it.
We got to rapid fire through this. So, first, let's get to this Michael Flynn clip. Michael Flynn, who, crazily enough, used to be the national security advisor for less than a month, has gone down an amazing conspiracy rabbit hole here. He's talking about COVID vaccinations, and I don't know what kind of stream this is on, that Clay Clark's Thrive Time show. This is a part of the burgeoning but also incredibly limited COVID conspiracy network. And he says he's heard a story about how the government is going to choose to vaccinate people, and it's quite creative. Let's hear his theory.
I got to put, somebody sent me a thing this morning where they're talking about putting the vaccine into salad dressing or salads. Have you seen this?
Yes.
Have you seen this? I'm thinking to myself, this is the bizarro world, right? This is definitely the bizarro world. So there's the seriousness of what this professional realized he.
Notice he's wearing a T-shirt with the phrase General Flynn on it. I just wanted to point that out. Merch. And then we can, he's hawking his merch, but definitely don't sell salad dressing, General Flynn. We'll keep going.
And just as a little context, Clay Clark is like a business coach from Oklahoma, and that's his wife with him. And the guy in the bottom of the stream is a rare precious metals expert named Andrew Sorcini. Just to give us
amazing committee of geniuses on display there.
Yep.
So there's the seriousness of what this professional realized he was doing wrong, and he's now he's found a new way. And then there's just the laughability on the other extreme that these people are seriously thinking about how to impose their will on us in our society, and it's
take away your freedom of choice.
Stop.
They know better.
Take away your freedom of choice, right? I mean, the salad dressing theory, the other co-host there had heard about that. He's heard about that. They're putting it in blue cheese, and your balls are going to swell up.
That's the thing.
Blue balls dressing.
From Not Even a Show, we played the clip where Chris James pranked the conspiracy, the QAnoners, and they can't admit that they don't know a conspiracy that they bring to them. That you have to be clued into everything, so you can just make stuff up and be like,
exactly.
Yeah,
I've heard about that. I'm as in the know. I'm as enlightened, and my narcissistic view that I am the only person who can see behind the curtain of whatever the deep state is putting up. It doesn't allow for anybody to say that they haven't heard of a conspiracy theory.
Did you guys hear about this? Michael Flynn has a younger brother who is a United States Army general who serves as commanding general of the United States Army in the Pacific. He previously served as deputy chief of staff for operations, plans, and training for the Army staff. Basically, very high up, controls the Army in the Pacific, like we said.
Maybe that's how he knows about the salad dressing thing.
Well, honestly, Michael Flynn is a joke right now, and Michael Flynn made the point, we got the joke and we got the serious stuff. I would go back and read Michael Hastings' book, The Operators, on that, or just Control Find in a ebook of it, Flynn, and how central Michael Flynn was to the quagmire in Afghanistan and keeping that going along. And how much that he knows things. He's a lunatic, but he's also privy to secrets, and it's a very dangerous guy. And honestly, that he's doing this type of stuff, it is a relief that he's not the national security advisor anymore.
Yeah.
I just thought he was going to start going into his own line of salad dressing from that clip. That's where these grifts always end. It's like that thing that you're buying is actually going to feminize you. So buy General Flynn salad dressing.
Right. Yeah. Matt was just saying hashtag safe salad.
I thought like conservatives thought eating vegetables was like gay or something. Like, no offense to vegetables, I suppose, but like that was part of that whole only eat meat thing. That if you ate vegetables, it made you kind of like womany or soy or something. It's all.
This all came from there's a study or something being done at the University of, I think, California or something, where basically they were looking into growing a plant with the same medication active in the mRNA vaccines, basically so they could overcome the issue with the deep freezing of the vaccine. Sort of a way, I guess, to transport it and make it easier to handle, because as you know, these vaccines need to be kept at certain temperatures, and there's been multiple stories out there of people sabotaging these vaccines and leaving them out so they become worthless. So they take something like this and I don't know if someone purposely misconstrues it, which is definitely possible, or it's just something that just as it continues down the grapevine, like a game of phone, it gets warped into all of a sudden they're putting it in our salad dressing, which is also possible. And also it's possible that it's a combination of the two.
It's a combo. I mean, I don't know if you guys drank your COVID vaccine. It's ingestible via your mouth. That's how they gave it to me at the Javits Center.
They're putting fentanyl in your weed and they're putting vaccines in your salad dressing. America just can't get itself together. No,
I know. Can't mix those two things either way. All right, this is the final clip we have to get to. I guess I just wanted to end on this because we had a conversation about this last week about de-radicalizing people and how long it takes. And we weren't able to get to this earlier in the week, but we'll leave you guys with this and then read some IMs and head out of here. Former Bolivian President Evo Morales was speaking as he was being sworn in as the president of a union, I believe. Yep. Yeah. He was talking about the concept of working with racists and fascists. This is a bit of a debate on the left. Now, I think Morales puts it in a beautiful way that people might want to heed certain folks because there's some wisdom here, and he's got some experience doing this on a very high level.
Por supuesto, hermanas y hermanos, tiene que haber reconciliación. Yo puedo enojarme con algún compañero de ustedes. A veces problemas se presentan. Puedo enojarme tal vez con el compañero Freddy Mamani. Algún problema. Entre compañeros nos reconciliamos. Pero con los racistas, fascistas, no va a haber reconciliación, hermanas y hermanos. ¿Nos ganan o los ganamos? Esa es la lucha ideológica, política, partidaria. Y no podemos claudicar y nunca hemos claudicado.
Reconciliation cannot be achieved with fascists and racists. And that is a message that is international and a message that the left should internalize here in the United States in order to be strategic and build power in a way that's constructive and not just getting, Patreon subs and YouTube clips.
Yeah, I want
to, for example.
I want to focus on both parts of that, because the first part, which is that reconciliation is possible, but we can fight, which I think is also important. I think there is too many people that are like, oh, look at the left eating itself alive again. And I think there needs to be a lot more, frankly, ability.
You mean, he said reconciliation with comrades who he disagrees with.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. And I think there does need to be more of that. And I think people that, shall we say, a bit reductively on our side need to be a little bit better about that. But at the same time, we have Tulsi Gabbard hitting Joe Biden for his open borders policy at the same time. Now, Jimmy Dore has been advocating, like Binder's been covering, for a cross Boogaloo Boys Alliance. But this is exactly why you can't do that. And I also think, don't call it Red Brown Alliance, because Morales is closer to a red than fucking Jimmy Dore is. This is something else, what's going on here. And people that actually know what they're doing and that are genuine leftists, genuine socialists or communists, they're very clear, Morales is here about what's possible with terms of partnering with ideological racists and fascists. First of all, it's a completely different. De-radicalization is not something toward a political movement. That's something that should just be done, hopefully, if we have resources to do that.
And done on a personal level, and it takes quite a long time, as Talia Levin has explained in her work.
Right, but I mean, this is an indictment on. I mean, I particularly think particularly as Tulsi Gabbard is doing her open borders bullshit. Like, this is the problem with Jimmy Dore talking about Boogaloo Boys, and they can keep trying to say like this is all about pearl clutching, but it's about them trying to invite fascists into the left.
All right. No, that was a great clip from Morales. I mean, if you can't take something from one of the, the biggest names on the stage of the left in a worldwide stage, then I mean.
You don't know about the Boogaloo Boys, don't you? Because I talked to one of them and he liked Medicare for all, so.
I like how in your impression, your dentures are falling out, even though you don't have
I lost
any.
my Jimmy Dore.
Right.
There was some delay there and I missed your Jimmy Dore impression.
The wonders of modern
I just
technology.
said, Evo, you don't know everything you're talking about. You gotta listen to these guys. Sometimes they support.
I don't know what voice I'm even doing anymore, actually.
I don't know either, but it does sort of sound like him.
You gotta listen to these guys. They support gay people.
All right,
let's read a few more IMs and then we're going to get out of here. Brendan Stand for Life. I thirst so hard for Alex Jones. I can't give him up without at least trying to fix him. Yikes. And then he also added, Alex Jones is a literal daddy. I can fix him. That can be your reclamation project. Camelot Harris. All right. Emma, what are your predictions for the Kansas City Chiefs this year? They're going to be good. I5. I once tried to buy an envelope of toilet paper and all I got were Interpol tickets.
I like Interpol, but I mean, at least a few songs off every album.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that they were brought into this whole shenanigans, all of these shenanigans. Christo, when do we get to hear the story of Steven's second mugging?
Oh, right. He mentioned he got mugged twice, right?
I mean, that was the first story he told, and it wasn't the mugging. So, I mean, we needed to hear the story of the only time he was mugged.
I'm not trying to doubt his sincerity, honestly, but yes, I am. Like,
Yeah,
there are a lot of situations he puts himself in, or that gain him sympathetic attention, or are designed to do so. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, that story is just a imaginary situation.
I believe that whether or not it happened, it has had a meaningful effect on how he views the world. And isn't that what's the most important thing?
Right, it's the lessons we learned along the way.
I saw Big Fish. I know it's about the stories.
I'm sure you did. Right, Brandon. Dave 4133. Kelly Marie Tran should be the next James Bond. Every racist, misogynistic dude would simultaneously explode. I have no idea who that is, but okay. Honk Goes the Truck. Maybe you can ask Guy and Naomi where they got their karaoke machines. My friend says it's not rude or presumptuous question to ask in the biz.
That's how I broke into this. I emailed Sam to have coffee, and I'm like, where do you get your public address equipment from?
Three more. Plot twist. Sam Seder is one of the scalpers. It sounds like clowny-ass Crowder got ripped off, but he can't admit he's scared of anyone who isn't white. I wonder if more unvaccinated men will do so because they think they'll get bigger testicles. Risk of impotence be damned.
If Crowder has a story about Australian ticket resellers that were Jewish from like the 90s, then I think we might have a case here.
People aren't ready to contend with the possibility that the mugger was in fact Justin Trudeau in blackface, and this is all just another one of his many characters. Small Haitian man in Montreal, along with like Black Aladdin, I guess.
I will say to the Sam Seder as the mugger scenario, it would make the reaction Crowder had to seeing Sam in that debate, quote unquote, make a lot more sense, honestly.
All right, two more. Jimmy Files. Once in Montreal, I bought a bat of Coke, but the dealer accidentally gave me ketamine. What a weird night. I'm sorry to hear that. And the final IM of the day. Guerrilla Business. USA Today might be the first to report the FBI has 43 missing persons cases that need to be solved since the Gabby Petito case. RIP. Oh, USA Today, the paper. Sorry. Yeah, that That's part of the way that the media chooses to cover these things.
There's definitely something there, but I also think that this case was extremely unique in a way that I think caught most people's attention. That even like the normal missing a white woman case doesn't even attract that type of attention. You know, I think the guy came home.
Is the thing too. Yeah, the guy coming home, like it is a very strange story.
Yes. I agree. I agree completely.
And the fact it's like, hey, instead of lawyering up, can you tell us where to maybe look for our daughter? That it's like, okay.
Right. Like usually they play up, they feign like they actually want to find the person, right? Like this guy just straight up came home and said, I'm not talking to anybody, and then disappeared himself.
Yep. And they still haven't found him, so pretty nuts. But we got a wrap, unfortunately. Matt, Brandon, Bradley, appreciate it, guys. Thanks for the great show. Fun times. We will see you all tomorrow. Sam will be joining us. Talk to you then.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick